clock on the back wall back there runs perpetually a little bit slow. So the first order of business we have this evening, besides calling to order our regular session of June 12, 2018, is the opening prayer and pledges of allegiance to the flags of the United States and the state of Texas. If you'll join me in standing, Councilmember Edwards will lead us in those. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you. Thank you. Dear Heavenly Father, in your strong hands, we ask right now that you will continue to guide us as we make decisions for the city. We thank you, Father God, for the volunteers, Father, that actually come out on a daily basis and do work around the city. We thank you, Lord, for giving us guidance and wisdom as we partake in your works tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. All right, the next item on the agenda this evening is a presentation regarding the recent City of Schertz Texas Association of Municipal Information Officers Awards. Been asked to move that until our next meeting, so we will do so. The next item, city events and announcements, and the first one is announcements of upcoming city events. Who has that one? Mr. Waite?
Yes, sir. Mayor, Thursday, June 14th at 11:30 is the monthly Northeast Partnership meeting. It's at the Olympia Hills Golf Course and Conference Center. This Friday, June 15th, is an elected officials workshop. It runs from 8:30 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. It's being put on through ACOG in partnership with Denton Navarro, Rocha Bernal, and ZEC and CPS Energy. It's free. It lasts all day, and you can go to the ACOG website to register. Next Tuesday, June 19th at 11:30 in the Civic Center is the monthly Chamber Luncheon. Thursday, June 21st is International Yoga Day. And in celebration of International Yoga, we're going to have an event in Pickerel Park from 5 p.m. to sunset. The event's free and open to the public. Everyone can join in on the fun. They're going to celebrate the yoga tradition. And whether you're new to yoga or a yoga expert, there'll be classes for all skills and abilities to participate. Bring water, bring a mat, and come out and have a good time. It's being sponsored by the Schertz Family YMCA, Schertz Parks and Rec, and Concrete Yoga. And if you want the schedule, if you can't come out from 5 to sunset, you can go to Schertz.com. There's a schedule and when what classes will be held at the park. The Saturday following that, Saturday, June 23rd, is our annual tee-off for the library. That starts at 10 a.m. in the morning and runs till 6 p.m. in the evening that Saturday. It's at the Schertz Library, and this is the event where we set up a miniature golf course within the library and have one and all come out and compete on the 18 holes of fun and in amongst the bookshelves and tables and everything in the library. It's a lot of fun. $5 is the entry fee. It includes a round of mini golf, a hot dog, chips, and a drink. And then Tuesday, June 26th at 6 p.m. is our next regular scheduled City Council meeting. And then after that, a week after that, Wednesday, July 4th, is our 4th of July Jubilee with the parade, the Freedom Run 5K, the parade, live music starts at 9:30 in the morning. I'm out here in front of City Hall. Pardon me, down the road just a little bit. And then runs till 10 p.m. with the fireworks. And tied to that is an event that we started last year. This is the second year. It's called Float and Fireworks. For those who don't want to be out in the heat, you can register with the Parks and Rec Department, get a wristband, and you can show up and float in the pool from 6 p.m. till 10 p.m. and enjoy the fireworks from inside the Pickerel Park pool. And then last on our announcements tonight is filing for Schertz City Council election for the November 6, 2018 election begins July 23rd, 2018, and any information on that, you can obtain that by contacting the City Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Waite. Next item on the agenda, announcements and recognitions by the acting city manager. Mr. James.
Two things, Mayor. First, I sent an update to council that we had some of our firefighters go back out to the Fort Davis area to help out. Talked to Kate Long, the fire chief, this afternoon, and he said they had returned just this afternoon, so they're back safe. The other thing is there was a request for an update on the sign, the electronic billboard sign It's kind of moving along, so I wanted to do a verbal based on the latest status. The sign is at the contractors. They have applied for their sign permit to do the installation. They were missing a couple bits of information with regard to photometrics and the installation details, and then insurance documentation. So once they get that into us, we can issue the permit and installation can proceed in a matter of a couple weeks. So I'll keep you posted on how that moves forward.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Next item is announcements and recognitions by the mayor. I don't have any this week, so we'll move directly into hearing of residents. And I'm actually going to start this evening on the list with Nicholas McDowell.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to tell all of you thank you for the opportunity to vote for my father as the renaming of the complex. We moved here when I was 4 years old, and I've had the opportunity to go through the organization myself. I played t-ball as a 5-year-old. I went all the way through high school. I umpired at this organization. For those of you that have lived here since before 1998, you know that we had 2 massive floods. I was there with him at Thulemeyer Park, pumping water off, and probably the same height then as I am now, and as much water as we could because we had a tournament the next day and using kitty litter and everything else you could imagine. He got me into umpiring games there, and so I umpired all the way through undergraduate. And then I've been lucky enough now that I'm a football coach and a teacher at Steele High School. And so I not only had the opportunity to have the experience of going through as a kid, as an adolescent, as a teenager, now as an adult, I get to see the influence from the other side of it. And the influence that the organization has had, when you can say almost 80% of our athletes and 80% of the kids that go through Steele High School and at Clemens, where I graduated from, were a part of this organization, it's an incredible thing to know that as a coach, every single day, the kids that are coming to you are well-versed in some of the most important aspects of life. And I get the opportunity to call that guy my dad. So I'm a lucky guy there in that sense. Naming this, I feel like you should name it after him, obviously. It's an important part of our community. He established a long time ago some of the important characteristics that it takes as an adult. You do those things, accountability, responsibility, and leadership. He certifies his coaches, something that most organizations you won't find do. You won't find this organization on Netflix as an original being talked about in bad ways. And to know that as a school district, as an employee of the school district, as somebody who lived here and grew up here, you can't say enough that this organization has been put together. The foundation of that is created by Johnny McDowell. And to have done that for over 20 years, to done it every single day. You can catch him changing lights in the light fixtures at Thulemeyer because we have to practice. I called him the other day, and he was 40 feet up on a lift changing something, and I was asking about lunch, and he does all of that for free. And I think that that's the part about this. As a teacher and as a coach, I can tell you that I've been at Steele High School for 8 years. I've been very successful, very lucky to have won a lot of games there, and yet the most influential thing and the most important thing I've learned is that it's not about wins and losses. It's not just about the impact you have on kids' lives every day. And I don't know that there's a better representation of our district, of our school district, of this city than Johnny McDowell. And so I think you should name it after him, obviously. That's my 2 cents, and it looks like I'm out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right, Faye Simmons.
What can I say after that? 50% of his adult life, John McDowell, I'll cry, I don't think so, has devoted his life to this city. And as his son said, he's touched the lives of thousands. Don't do this very often. So I really encourage you, real fast here, I really encourage you to honor this man. He has a respect of the parents. He is, as I said, he's touched the lives of thousands of children, and he won't want me to say this, but I think he's almost down to the children and the grandchildren. So please, let's do the thing that needs to be done and should have been done a long time ago. Let's name this the Johnny McDowell Sports Complex. Thank you for putting up with my emotionalness.
Thank you, ma'am. William Bosch.
Hi, my name is William Bosch. I'm on the Parks and Rec Board. After all of that, I'd just like to say that I'm in full support of this motion to name the ballpark to Johnny McDowell Ballpark. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. George Oberle.
I've known this man for over 25, 26 years. I've worked with him with the kids, and there's nobody more dedicated to the kids, and that's what we're here for. And he'll tell you, I got one more year than he's got. I'm an old fart. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Fred Mahaffley. Is that right, Mahaffley? Okay, good, good. I don't have my reading glasses with me, and if I do this, my wife is going to make fun of me when she watches the video later.
Been there. I'm just going to echo basically what George said. Known Johnny for quite a few years as an umpire, and now I'm a field director with Pony, and he's done a lot for the kids out here. An awful lot of things that he's done. And I've seen him out there on days when it was over 100 degrees on those lawn mowers and everything else, digging holes, whatever he could do to keep it going. So I think the city owes him a lot.
Thank you, sir. Mickey Terleski. Oh, yes. Yeah, I said Mickey Terleski. I didn't say Michelle. I didn't say Mrs. Because you've corrected me and said, my name's Mickey Terleski. So I'm trying to do better.
You are doing better. Name Carpenter, Mr. James, and members of council, 705 Maryland Drive. I'm sorry, Brenda. I have a few comments relating to last Tuesday's council meeting. But first, I'd like to talk about cats. Cats possess some unique characters that other animals do not have. Thank you. They are sneaky, mischievous, and born hunters. They hunt not just for food, but for the sport of hunting. They take great pleasure in tormenting the prey they capture. They also cover up any mess that they make. You know, a cat has done something by smell, but it will take you a while to figure out what they've done. As I stated last year, there's a cat, perhaps more than one, who likes to fill up the litter box quite frequently and is smelling up council chambers. Hopefully, we'll get that litter box cleaned out. Moving on. Tuesday's council meeting started out on a happy note, recognizing new and current employees, then quickly escalated to a goat rope. First out of the chute, the person of Schertz, who stands around the citizen sign-up roster like a gnat waiting for an apple to drop out of the desk because he's the last one to sign. The person of Schertz read an article given a spiel on leadership, a spiel we've heard over and over in addition to complaints as to getting along with Cibolo, that he can't get his land developed, blah, 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 the First Amendment, etc. News flash. You're not going to get a prize apple. Mr. Davis deleted the budget line item for apples last year. Yes, I know you feel that Mayor Carpenter is responsible for all your problems, the volcano in Hawaii, earthquakes, and any other issue you are asked as a minion to bring up before council. Strange that there are developers who are building houses off of I-35, 2 blocks from here on Schertz Parkway, on FM 1518, and building movie and medical buildings all within the city. Perhaps you're doing something in the sandbox these developers don't like. I would like to have comment on the issue of placing items on the agenda. However, I don't want to take the time to repeat myself 4 and 5 times to get my point across. I don't have Mayor Carpenter's patience. Now, the main topic. In my opinion, what happened next was nothing more than a setup to conduct a character assassination toward a citizen of this city. Odd that a week prior to council meeting, an incident happened in Kramer Farms in Jonas Woods that was disgusting and despicable. Odd that council member failed to state that the same problem occurred in Cibolo. Strange it wasn't mentioned that the idiots who committed the incident may not even be citizens of Schertz. May I go on? Odd that it occurred a week prior to the board and commission's nominations. Was council member trying to relate the Kramer Farms incident and use it as a reason for the negative vote? Strange that the same council member didn't find Mr. Thompson a racist last year. Strange that council members waited until council meeting to bring up the famous Thompson incident, rather than just voting, going into closed session to discuss, or as we in the peanut gallery are aware, call a special meeting. Some council members chose to try and embarrass Mr. Thompson, again, a citizen of this community. We know that some of these members haven't hesitated in the past to call a special meeting. Why wasn't a special meeting called this time? Strange that the person of Schertz who advocated council censoring use of social media by members of council and boards and used social media to spew his comments about Mr. Thompson the Saturday after the nomination committee met and prior to city council vote. How coincidental is that? He seems to always know what council is going to do. Guess he has inside information and the rest of us don't. There were several ways to handle the nomination vote, but no, it was better to insinuate that the city has a racial problem and that anyone who makes a mistake and apologizes should forever be punished by people who consider themselves seated on a throne of power. How sad. It's sad that a council member harbors so much hate. How can you be happy if you haven't learned to forgive? I don't support BLM and Antifa or any organization with members who disrespect our flag, anthem, and country. If certain members of council choose to support these groups, it's your choice. I prefer to honor the flag and my country, and if you wish to call me a racist, so be it. I've never understood that using the N-word is offensive for a member of one race to use, and I believe that it is offensive. Why is it acceptable for the offended race to use that same word in movies and music? It should be wrong for any race. And I might add, there's only one race in the world, and that's the human race. The use of any word to promote hate and inflict harm is disgusting and not welcomed in society, whether it's the N-word, the F-word, the B-word, or the R-word. Lastly, I find it convenient that the whole issue of the N-word was brought up right before candidates filed for election. It's been almost a year and you still hold a grudge. I hope squatting on your spurs was worth it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up, Leon Hernandez.
Hello, City Council members and City Mayor. My name is Leon Hernandez. I have lived in Schertz for almost 12 years. Today, I come here to express my disappointment with management within our city, directing most of my frustration to those in charge of Schertz Animal Services. My wife, Debbie Hernandez, recently gave her 2 weeks' notice and has left the city because she was not promoted to Animal Services Supervisor. Well, you ask yourself, why is he upset? The answer will soon be clear. Debbie would have been with the city of Schertz in the same department for 10 years come July 22nd of next month. Before she left, she was interim supervisor for the past 10 months and knew the shelter inside and out. Nobody in the city knew the shelter better than her. You see, she had already been through 4 supervisors in almost 10 years, and this new one would have been number 5. From my understanding, the new supervisor has a high school diploma with no college hours, had about 1.5 years in animal control, and after that had been doing adoptions for the city of San Antonio for the past 5 years until getting this job. She has no prior management experience. She has no animal control license, euthanasia certificates, or any certificates in management. Debbie has a high school diploma and 1,500 hours in cosmetology from an accredited school and is licensed in the state of Texas. She has her animal control license in the state of Texas, euthanasia certificates, and many more that she has acquired in the 10 years she has been with the city. She has been to many conferences and has accumulated many hours pertaining to animal control, including shelter management classes and animal control supervisor classes. The city has spent thousands of dollars to train her. She was the go-to person on 2 occasions, once for 5 months and this last time for 10 months. Only a small amount of people who really know that Debbie was the reason the shelter ran so smoothly during the last supervisor's tenure. She did the day-to-day workload and made many contacts in the past 10 years with the city. Debbie was not only the most qualified, but she lives right here in Schertz, not even a mile away from the shelter, and yet management hired someone that lives on the south side of San Antonio, 45 minutes away. I couldn't tell you how many times Debbie was called out in the middle of the night to help out other animal control officers or called to meet at the shelter. Do you want to know what the reason my wife was given for not getting the job? The department manager told her in front of the whole staff that it was political. What kind of reason is that? To pass up a proven and competent person who has never been reprimanded or written up in the 10 years with the city and a model employee to a person who has very little to no experience. Now, because the new supervisor has no experience and doesn't know the state and local laws and ordinances, our city shelter is starting to fall apart. I have been told that there have been illegal dumping of feral cats in the city of Cibolo, orchestrated by the new supervisor, that our animal control officers are being asked to do things that shouldn't be done. An employee has been promoted to animal control officer because she was friends with the new supervisor before her hiring, and protocol was not followed in the promotion process. Shelter employees are being cussed at and mistreated, including a special needs worker at the shelter. That the shelter has been without food for the animals not only once, but twice since Debbie has left. Both times the animals had nothing to eat for 2 days. Dogs are being kept 2 or more in a kennel because there is no more room. These dogs are not being spayed or neutered or vaccinated, just put in kennels with others. If you know anything about shelters, this means the spread of disease and unwanted pregnancy of dogs. This also leads to unnecessary euthanizing of animals. The supervisor told some of the employees at the shelter that she was lied to by management, that she was told Debbie was going to be here to do all this and that she didn't know what she was doing and that Debbie was supposed to show her how. How do you ask someone to teach another person a job they were hired to do? They should already know. We should ask ourselves what other wrong decisions are being made by this department head. Was there any wrongdoing in the hiring process? What does political mean? My wife gave her heart and soul to make this shelter better. How do we ask anyone to stay after this betrayal? Debbie made up her mind to leave because of management. She never had confidence in her department manager and his decision-making, and she felt used because of his lies. Another employee left a week before Debbie because he said, if he could lie to us in our face, then who wants to work in a place like this? Almost on a daily basis, Debbie gets calls on her phone by employees of the city, citizens, and employees of other cities because of these decisions, and it hurts her to know that these things are going on. Now, it's my understanding that 82 people have left the city in the past year, mostly because of management not hiring within or because of lack of pay increases. Many of these people with years in the city. Is this the city we want for our citizens? I don't think so. My wife deserves answers, and our citizens deserve answers. I request that City Council look into this department manager's decision-making concerning animal services and whether those decisions were legally made and was all protocol followed. How did he come to his decisions, and what was the deciding factors? Are animal control employees being mistreated, especially the special needs employee, because they don't deserve that? And is favoritism playing a role in promoting at the animal services? And is protocol being followed? Are employees being asked to break state and local laws and ordinances? And last but not least, find out, what does political mean? We deserve the truth, and our city employees deserve to be treated with respect, and these poor animals deserve better than what they are getting. Now, these concerns have been told to Debbie, and it hurts her knowing that it's going on. But a lot of these people are afraid to come forward in fear of retaliation and losing their jobs, and I don't think that's right. I ask each and one of y'all to go to the shelter, walk around tomorrow, and see what's going on over there. Just ask some questions. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you, sir. Next up, Donna Johnston.
Mayor, Council, I'm not a resident of the city of Schertz, but all three of my boys played ball at Buffalo Valley with Johnny at the helm back then, as he is now. I want to say that there's no one more deserving of this honor than him. He was involved in the original construction, the opening, the maintenance, many hours of grass cutting, which I think he has a special bond with tractors and mowers. Just saying. On the other side of upkeep, maintenance of the parks, there are hundreds of kids that would not have had the opportunity to play ball at either ballpark, and had it not been for Johnny's commitment to BBYA, the ball fields, and the Schertz community. He does 100% of the work for that, and he's done it for free for a number of years, and this would, in my opinion, is a past due honor that should be bestowed upon him. Thanks.
Very good, thank you. All right, Maggie Titterington.
Good evening, Council. Just some really good things to share with you tonight. We finished our Leadership Corps class at the Chamber, and our visit today was with Randolph Air Force Base, the air control towers, crashing planes, unfortunately, and also with our nonprofits. And I just wanted to point out and just bring to the attention, I'm sure you all have already heard from residents and others, but the YMCA is such a great partner to the city of Schertz, and we just found out how much today as we were walking through. We started at the actual Y and learning about the basics, and I already knew the foundation of where the YMCA came from. But then to actually walk through the gym, walk into the splash pad, see the children's camp that they do during the summer and how they're affecting that younger generation, walking through the natatorium and seeing mixed generations doing their swimming, doing their exercises, walking through to the senior center and seeing them playing, it's a sitting volleyball. And it just struck me just what an awesome partnership it was, the foresight that you all had as a council to enter into the agreements that you did, not just with the senior center, but with the natatorium and stuff, and what an effect that we're now seeing with those partnerships. So I just want to bring that to your attention. It's just to see such a mixed generation of people enjoying things that you all put into quality of life, to think about. I mean, as a citizen, I want to thank you, and if you had been there today, it was just really, truly awesome to see. Also, I'm very excited about the workshop item here about the local flavor, incentives, and Main Street improvement plan. I've talked extensively to Councilman Davis as well as to Kyle Kinnetetter, and just I know some of the things that will be discussed, but just, again, thank you for that consideration. I know I've been beating this drum for 2 years. It's not exactly what I wanted initially, but I think the foot's in the door and your ears were opened and you all see where I'm coming from on this, so very excited to hear that item. And last but not least, I am in agreement with everyone that has come up here, and I cannot think of a better person than Johnny McDowell for this ballpark to be named after. When you're driving around Schertz and you see the names of great men that have helped put our city to where it is. You see Roy Richard, the road named after him, and Bob Bucher down Tri-County Corridor, and of course our late Mayor Hal Baldwin. And I really firmly believe Johnny McDowell should be the next one on that list. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Cindy Mullins. Could you step up just a little? Awesome, thank you.
Living in this community for over 40 years, have known Johnny McDowell for over 20. I volunteered at the old ballparks for a number of years when my children played. I've known Johnny driving by. My husband and I would drive by, and there's Johnny on his little tractor out there mowing, and doing all kinds of other things. If there is a man in this community that deserves this honor, it is Johnny McDowell. Johnny and his group of people have hosted numerous tournaments for pony baseball, and even them in Washington, Pennsylvania, think the world of Johnny. And he does a stand-up job. So, I mean, he's a great friend, and you couldn't ask for a better man to honor your ballpark. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ken Greenwald.
Good evening, members of council, Mr. Mayor. Ken Greenwald, 205 Westchester, Schertz, Texas, 78154. If anybody deserves a ballpark being named for him, it's Johnny. Majority of you don't know who pushed the bond issue many, many moons ago. Johnny was one of the leaders. If it wasn't for him, I don't think we'd have the ballpark. We wouldn't have been able to push the bond issue. Since he's done that, he's also been working out here almost every weekend. Water leaks, sprinkler leaks for the water system, for the grass. He schedules all of the items that need to be done for chemicals. He doesn't have license for it, so we just have to hire somebody. I've been with him off and on since, I want to say, about 84, at least 84. Been with the organization since about 74. My children have gone through it. My grandchildren have gone through it. I don't hope I'm around for my great-great-grandchildren. But if they are, I want them want them to recognize who did most of the work to get this field set up and get the park the way it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Brian Rothrock. Hopefully I got that right. Rothrock?
Thank you for the opportunity. On behalf of the Buffalo Valley Youth Association Board and Trustees, we do all in agreement change the name of Schertz Ballpark to Johnny McDowell Sports Complex. There's not you see BVYA or you think of Buffalo Valley, you see Johnny's face. So if it was in the dictionary, his face will be next to Buffalo Valley Youth Association.
That's true.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, Brent Bolter.
Brent Bolter, 2633 Cloverbrook Lane. I wasn't here to speak about the ballpark, but it seems like everybody's, so what the heck? Johnny, by all means, have the ballpark named after you. I was here to talk to two items, the items that are on the agenda. The one having to do with Wiederstein Road and what you guys have laid out as a plan to work with Sybil going forward. I spoke before council and brought that up. I was glad to see that you guys are going down the road to do that. The only pitch I'm also going to make is for those of us that live in Belmont Park and Riata, that you continue to look at Old Wiederstein as well, okay? Because that's going to come into play when all this other stuff goes down. So anything that you can do in that regard would be much appreciated. The second item I wanted to speak to, and I spoke last week in regards to rules, city council, social media. So I laid out last time how I felt that other people who didn't want to go that route could get their viewpoints expressed. What I want to talk to tonight, though, is specifically I feel that at least some part of this is an attempt to curtail one of the council members' activities on social media. I think that there's some sentiment that when that council person has been out on social media to just inform the citizens and navigate his position, that some on council didn't view that favorably. So I'm just going to speak to, I would caution, if that's the motivation here, then I don't agree with it. And many others that I've talked to on this item also agree that that's not a way to go. You have disagreements. There's nothing wrong with voicing a different opinion. That's what this country is all about. Opposing viewpoints are welcome, should be welcome. Nobody has to think alike on any item. So if there's any hint of that in regards to rules for city council on social media in an attempt to quash, for lack of a better term, one of your own members' activities on social media, I don't support that. So I just wanted to put that out on the table and leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. All right, Dana Eldridge.
Dana Eldridge, 2628 Gallant Fox Drive, Cibolo, Texas, 78108. Good on Johnny for being his ballpark named after him. I saw a lot of people come up here, all ages, so it's a good job. What I came to talk about was what happened last week. I was embarrassed, as some of you should be, in how things were handled. To state that you don't want somebody on a certain board, that's fine. You make the statement, so-and-so shouldn't be allowed. But to go farther than that, I have to be careful what I say up here, otherwise I can be walked out, according to the rules on the sheet of what it says there. There's a code of ethics for the board, for the council. I feel that that code of ethics was violated last week with the way it was handled and the way Mr. Thompson was belittled and berated from the council. I'm very disappointed that it happened. His name was put forward by members of the council and members of the community that are on that, serving on that committee, to forward names. It came to the council, and the people that voted him to go forward, let him stand up here and get embarrassed. It looked like it was a public way to humiliate an individual. The script that was written when Mr. Azaz got up here and talked, and then when the councilwoman talked, the script was almost identical. Shameful. Shameful. If you can't keep your vote straight, what are you doing? If you don't want him up on the board to be presented to a full vote, then don't put him forward. But don't let him get up here and then one person out of all the 7 or 8 committees that you put together, we don't want that individual, and then you spout out stuff that came out a whole year ago. It's wrong. Shameful. I'm sorry it happened. I'm waiting for an apology.
Thank you, sir. John Sullivan.
John Sullivan, 513 Triple Crown. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Mr. James, Attorney, Mr. Santee. First of all, I want to say it's been a pleasure to work with Johnny McDowell on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board as he has led us. He has, it's actually quite unimaginable the amount of time he's put into BVYA and effort and work. So I really can't think of a better way to honor that ballpark than to name it after Johnny McDowell, really. Also wanted to speak about the workshop regarding Wiederstein and with the city of Cibolo. Really encouraged, and we look forward to seeing the two cities work together on that project. I agree, we definitely need improvements at the light. We need a light at 35, Old Wiederstein, and there has been lots of confusion. Everyone is confused about the name of that road, so I really think that'd be a good thing to clear that up with the city of Cibolo one way or the other. However it needs to be. I'm really curious what the traffic study says about Old Wiederstein, because I know it's going to be an easy way to get to these new developments, Cibolo Crossing and that kind of thing. So I really think discussion about Old Wiederstein should be included in this conversation, especially considering Cibolo has built a development over a large portion of Old Wiederstein, and they never improved that section. And then on the other side of the road is the school board, or the future high school, supposedly, as planned, and that's probably 6 or more years away from being done. So I don't think we can wait that long to improve Old Wiederstein, so somehow we got to figure out how to make that happen. Other than that, I'm in support of Johnny McDowell being the ballpark being named after him. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. All right, that's everyone that I had signed up this evening. So we're going to go quickly to our consent agenda items, and the next item after that will be the resolution 18R65. So on consent this evening, we have the minutes, consideration or action regarding the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of June 5th, 2018. Item number 2, resolution 18R66, a resolution by the City Council of City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the approval of the Bear Metro 911 budget for fiscal year 2019 and other matters in connection therewith. And item number 3, the Main Street Committee member reappointments, is the reappointment of council members Davis, Larson, and Edwards to the Main Street Committee. Any of these need to be pulled and considered individually? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the items listed in consent?
So moved.
As stated.
I've got a motion from Mr. Crawford. Is there a second?
Second.
A second from Mr. Edwards. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 I have 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. All right, next item that we have on the agenda this evening is, in fact, easy for me to say, Resolution 18R65, a resolution by the City Council of City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the renaming of the Schertz Ballpark to the Johnny McDowell Sports Complex. Ms. Shrum, good afternoon, or evening, rather.
Evening.
How are you?
Mayor, Council, I'm well, thank you. Just a quick presentation here. You heard a lot about Mr. McDowell already. I just wanted to go over some of the numbers associated with his volunteer service to the city of Schertz. So the history of BVYA, if you don't already know, we've had a relationship with them since about 1975. It's been about 43 years. Their home was first at Thulmeyer Park, and then to now we've moved into Schertz Ballpark. They have an office building in Pickerel Park. They do swimming out of Pickerel Park Pool, and they host basketball and volleyball out of SCU CISD facilities. So who is Johnny? There's that beaming smile. Johnny has been involved for 28 years. He has been on the BVYA board since 1995, and he has been president of that board for 18 years. He was just elected again to serve until 2020. He started, like most parents do, by coaching his son's baseball teams, and then he just kind of got roped in, and in his own words, BVYA became his hobby. Since Johnny has been involved, BVY has grown from 250 kids just playing baseball, softball, and basketball to now over 2,502 playing baseball, softball, football, cheerleading, basketball, volleyball, and swimming. He has been through 2 major floods at Thulmeyer, like they mentioned, all the cleanup associated with that. He has worked to garner financial sponsorships for the organization, like Academy, Raising Cane's. He's also leveraged a lot of business contacts to get in-kind sponsorships. He's gotten LED light fixtures for us at Pickerel Pool. He's got a new office roof on the Pickerel office building. So he's done a lot for the facilities. He did work through 2 failed bond issues, trying to get a complex done, and then he joined forces with the soccer leagues, and they were able to finally get it done, and we were able to get the new expansion of the ballpark and the soccer complex passed by the voters. In addition to BVYA, he has also been a member of the Parks and Rec Advisory Board since its inception in January of 2006. So that's been about 12 years. He has chaired that board since July of 2014. So there was a recommendation at the April meeting to put this request on the agenda. In May, it was discussed by the board. We do have that naming policy that specifies we would name parks for individuals who are non-living, but the board felt that his exceptional level of service was significant enough to overlook that requirement. His contributions to the park system and community as a whole have been very significant. So they voted unanimously to rename Schertz Ballpark the Johnny McDowell Sports Complex, and I'm here today to bring that recommendation forward to you. In case you were wondering about the iconic signage at the ballpark, we don't recommend removing that. We're going to add to it, probably complimentary, something like our stone signs at our other parks, or maybe mimicking another arch at the other entrance. So we're going to do some sort of signage and recognition, but we won't lose that iconic arch, just in case anybody was concerned about that. And I'll open it up with that to discussion or questions.
Very good, thank you. Council.
Mr.
Gutierrez.
I just have a comment. Money can buy just about anything in the world except time. Time is priceless. And Johnny, you have devoted your time to the children of Schertz. That is the most precious thing any parent could ever have. Sir, there's nothing else that we can do but thank you for your time.
Very good, thank you, sir. Mr. Davis.
Mr. Mayor, I had the pleasure of, the first board that I sat on in the city was the Parks and Recs Board, and I had the pleasure of working with Mr. McDowell on numerous projects on that board. If the council will indulge me, it would be my honor, after working with him, to go ahead and make the motion to approve resolution number 18R65, renaming the sports, or the Schertz Ballpark, the Johnny McDowell Sports Complex.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Davis. I have a second from Mr. Edwards. That said, other members of council?
I'd like to say something.
Mr. Edwards.
Johnny, you basically raised my 4 children. You and everyone else back there. You guys have all gotten older. I've gotten younger. You guys, I remember a lot of the guys, and I'm sitting back going, wow, just to see the people in this room now supporting you. Johnny, I cannot think of a better person to have a park named after, especially baseball fields. A lot of chocolate, I can remember chocolate. I remember arguing calls in gymnasiums and out on baseball fields. My God, I remember when Kane broke his nose playing out baseball, catching a ball with his teeth. So I'm just ecstatic to see this being named after you, Johnny. You are well-deserved. Thank you so much. Volunteerism. If this is scriptural, it would say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Good job. Thank you for serving the city of Schertz.
Council, anyone else?
Mr. McDowell.
Mr. Crawford.
I don't know you very well, but I would say tonight you are an example of superb leadership by example. You said something that's difficult for any of us to follow. Thank you.
So in addition to all the time that Johnny has spent caring for fields, promoting the organization, giving his time, we've had conversations from time to time where he's had to be the arbitrator between coaches, parents and coaches, some of the stuff that's hardest to deal with in any organization. And he's done it with elegance and with class and with patience that has been an inspiration to me in this chair. Those are difficult things to work through, and I've never heard of a result where in the end the parties involved didn't say, I hated that, but I get it, and Mr. McDowell was right. That's an extraordinary accomplishment for anyone, and that's a hard part of the thing that he's done for the last 20 plus years that quietly gets dealt with and quietly makes it look like the organization doesn't have any challenges within it at all. It's because for the most part they end up with Johnny and he takes care of them. It's remarkable stuff, and I must concur with council and with everyone that stood forth. You know, the city of Schertz, since its inception in 1958, has become what it is because of volunteers. Folks from the community that step forward, not for pay, but simply for the good of the community. And Johnny, you exemplify that group that has stood forth and given their life's time and blood since this city became a city in 1958. It's our 60th anniversary this year as a city. How fitting that we might take this action at this time with Mr. McDowell. So with that, I have a motion and a second, and I'm going to call for a vote.
Most definitely aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
I have 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. All right, we're going to move on with the rest of our agenda at this time, the business that we have before us. Y'all can stay if you want to, but you don't have to stay for the rest of the business of the evening. In fact, I suggest we take a 5-minute recess, and everyone would like to congratulate Mr. McDowell get an opportunity to do so. We'll take things up in 5 minutes.
I'd like to myself.
Oh, ask you something. If you wanted to put this picture up there, can you just show me?
We can do that. You know, I'm probably.
We're back into open session at this time. Next item that we have on the agenda is Resolution 18R67, and that resolution reads, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an amendment to the professional services agreement with Cobb Finley and Associates Incorporated relating to engineering design services for the Woman Hollering Creek wastewater line project and other matters in connection therewith. Ms. Woodley, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Mr. James. So I'm sure you've read your memo that explains what the additional services are for. I did want to just show an exhibit here to kind of explain why we need the extra length in the main. So what you see here is the entire length of the project from 1518 in the existing Sedona lift station to Trainer Hale Road. And here in kind of a really light blue is the CCMA property. Originally, when we started out with this design, we said, well, we'll take our wastewater down to the plant. Well, the plant, I'll show you another exhibit here that shows this is the CCMA property. The plant itself will be back here, quite a ways off of Trainer Hale Road. So either they had to bring an intake point to us, or we would have to take our line to them. Either way, the city, because we're participating in the design of the treatment plant, either way, we're paying for it. We felt it was easier to add to our contract and design an additional force main to bridge the gap between those two locations. There's also some additional services that we need for a couple other reasons. One, we've been working with property owners. We're in the easement acquisition process and trying to accommodate some of their needs, trying to skinny up some easements, make them 30 feet instead of 40 feet. We've had to go back and do a little bit of redesign. At least one property sold and split into two since we started, so easements that were already drawn up, meets and bounds had already been prepared. We have to go back and redo those. So there's a variety of additional costs that we're asking for authorization on. We're also asking for an additional authorization for $50,000 to, again, we're in the middle of these negotiations with folks so that if there are additional needs from our consulting engineer, we can go ahead and contract without having to come back to you in just little bits and pieces, and we can hopefully get this wrapped up without too much more trouble. And with that, any questions?
All right, council, questions for Ms. Woodley?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Edwards.
So it's 1,800 linear feet that you're trying to go.
Correct.
Okay, so with that being done, will that take care of the whole problem at that point? Will we actually have connection at that point, though? We won't be coming back for more.
Not for more sewer interceptor length.
Okay, that's all I need to know. You're good.
All right, anyone else? Mr. Crawford.
Kathy, thank you for the email you sent to Brian answering my questions about the cost increase. And Mr. James, would you mind making a comment or two about the certificate of obligation bonds and those things, and the $50,000 contingency, and how we might explain that and such that we talked about earlier, please?
Sure. So maybe to clarify on Councilman Edwards' question, what we're coming back for here is to increase the contract amount with Cobb Finley, that's the design firm. As Kathy said, at this point, we think we're good with the amount we're asking for design services. It covers the extra length. It covers some additional work that's had to been done with the alignment and sort of sorting that out that we've had along the project. And it covers work we may need to ask them to do as a result of the negotiations with property owners for easements. So again, design plans are 99% roughly, but with comments, so we're pretty close on that. We'll start the negotiation with property owners, and that may cause some shifts or adjustments that we see. But we hope with this, we're done with the design and the engineering firm's work with easement acquisition. We obviously have to pay for those easements going forward with what those come in. But I think what Councilman Crawford talked to, and what I want to clarify for Councilman Edwards is, when we had come forward with this, a number of times, the initial cost we were looking at for the project, the total project cost, was just under $6 million. At this point, we've included in the staff report that we're upwards of $12 million, with the construction going from about 5.9 to about 10.9 in total. So it's gotten much more expensive, and that's been for a number of reasons. One is the cost of the pipe that's needed has gone up, and as somebody sort of said, when you got a lot of pipe and you go up a little bit even on price, that grows significantly. So the pipe cost has nearly doubled as part of it. Some of the links are a bit different. Some of the design is different. The original estimate didn't include some of the things that we need to do, such as boring under, the creek, and then FM 1518 as well. So that adds cost. So again, it's a bit of a rougher number at the start, and then we define down. Standard manhole sizes changed. Seems like a minor thing, but you go from 48 inches to 60 inches. That adds up. And then the lift station goes up significantly as well, associated $650,000 to about $1.3 million. So when the question comes back is, are we going to be back? We're going to be back to deal with when this goes out to bid, how we pay for it. To Councilman Crawford's sort of question, at this point in the back of the report, we kind of laid out how we estimate paying for it. We've got about $6 million right now in sewer capital recovery. We collect about $400,000 or so, a little bit over that every 6 months. So we think we'll have about $6.5 million or so coming from there. We've got about $1.5 million from the reserve fund for sewer, and then the rest we would issue certificates of obligation. Now the issue is it's how you pay those, or how you issue those, and how you pay those back. And so certainly where you'd want to pay it is from the sewer fund, and that obviously affects rates and things like that we charge, as opposed to a general fund, so that I'm not hiring police officers and paying in sewer. I need our water and sewer system to kind of stand on their own, more or less, which gives us that general fund money to do the other things we want to do. So if that's...
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, is there a motion to approve 18R67?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Gutierrez. Any other comments or questions from council? If none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Woodley. Item number 6, ordinance number 18M20, an ordinance by the City of Schertz authorizing and amending City Council rules of conduct and procedure, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance and providing an effective date. Anybody have any questions about what we've done and the changes we've made to the rules? I think they're pretty clear. All right, if not, is there a motion to approve ordinance 18M20?
So be it.
Second.
A motion from Mr. Crawford, a second from Mr. Edwards. Any other comments or questions from council? Mr. Gutierrez?
We're discussing the objection, am I correct, Mayor?
No, sir. This particular one, we took a vote, and the prevailing will of council was to clarify that objections to requests by council members for items to be placed on a future agenda will not be considered by the chair.
I just want to caution my colleagues here is that this has the potential of causing more harm by passing this ordinance. I just don't agree with it, and I think that there is a better compromise that we can probably work out instead of just removing the objection completely. And there's no subject crucial enough that it cannot wait another week. If there is an objection that we cannot discuss it, and then at that point, maybe take a vote, and the majority of council says, let's move on. We can go ahead and put the item on the agenda. It could become a circus, and that's my fear. We don't want it to be a circus. We're here to conduct serious matters of this city. And that's all I have to say.
Very good. Anyone else? I do have a motion and a second. If there's nothing else, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay. Aye.
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 5 ayes and 2 nays. The motion carries. Next item that we have on the agenda this evening, we have ordinance 18M21, an ordinance temporarily suspending certain provisions of Chapter 62 of the City of Schertz Code of Ordinances regulating peddlers and solicitors, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, declaring an emergency, providing an effective date, and other matters in connection therewith. Mr. Waite.
Mayor and members of council, our police department does most of our permitting for this ordinance in the city. And over quite some time, they've been compiling several things that need to be updated in our current ordinance. Some of these may be changes in state law, changes based upon recent court decisions or other court decisions. And then a third category are things that they are receiving from either primarily citizen complaints that they're seeing out there in our community, and ways to tighten some of that up while still maintaining the things that the majority of citizens want to see. So over the past few months, we've been trying to find the best way to bring this forward to council and present you with those changes. During this time, we were notified by our legal counsel that there's one provision in our ordinance that has recently or has been adjudicated as being unconstitutional in recent appeals court decisions. And that is how we restrict in our current ordinance any soliciting or peddling after 6 p.m. at night, Monday through Saturday. And that we needed to probably, since we are working on bringing that forward for a lengthy discussion with council about trying to change this ordinance more in depth, this was something that we probably needed to look at passing an ordinance to allow the police department not to enforce the 6 p.m. stoppage. And the recommendation from staff is to, during this temporary period, to take that to a latest time frame of 30 minutes past sunset. And then come back in our discussions with council about updating the ordinance to discuss other options we may have on that. Because of that decision, because of what our current ordinance that we are restricting vendors in the city in a way that has been proven by some to be unconstitutional, that's why we're asking council to also declare this an emergency and make that change so PD can start making that enforcement change as soon as tomorrow.
All right, any questions for Mr. Waite?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve ordinance number 18M21.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Dr. Kaiser. Any other comments or questions from council? Mr. Larson.
I just wanted to, I think, is that the video show, and people might be like, well, why just gotta go over to the lawyer? I want to make sure everything's on the record. I had a concern with abusing the declaration of emergency powers of council. And so my question was, is there a reason that it's in the city's best interest to declare the emergency? And the response was yes, and Mr. Dudley explained why, because it may not be constitutional what we're currently doing. So I just wanted that to be on the record for everybody here so they don't think there's any funny business going on. But I will say I am concerned about overusing the emergency powers of council, but in this case it seems warranted.
Very good. Anyone else? If not, I have a motion and a second, and I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. I have 7 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. Next item we have on the agenda is a roll call vote confirmation.
Consent agenda items 1 through 3. Motion was made by Councilmember Crawford, seconded by Councilmember Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola. Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 4, Resolution 18R65. Motion was made by Councilmember Davis, seconded by Councilmember Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 5, Resolution number 18R67. Motion was made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 6, Ordinance number 18M20 on first reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Crawford, seconded by Councilmember Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. Councilmembers Gutierrez and Larson voted no. Motion passed. Item number 7, 18M21 on first and final reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Dr. Kaiser, Councilmember Kaiser. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Edwards, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item we have on the agenda this evening is a workshop, and we have a discussion regarding the Main Street Improvement Project and local flavor incentives. Mr. James?
Okay. So just for the benefit of everyone in the audience, you know, there has been a committee of City Council working for some time to help us kind of really refine and determine how we want to spend city funds for Main Street. You may recall initially there was the $1 million in bond funds for Main Street improvements, those physical improvements that we have going forward. We have about $400,000 or so in leftover road improvements that was going to be tacked onto it, and then the idea was to work to get other funds to really make an impact. And not to speak for the committee, but I think the feeling was is that if we're going to make a large investment in the Main Street area and physical improvements, we ought not simply be looking at those physical improvements for their own sake. You know, building the street, filling in gaps in sidewalks. Certainly all of the areas in the city need those things and expect that level of service. But it became about trying to leverage those city funds. And part of it went beyond just the physical improvements, but it became to really turn Main Street into the area that I think folks wanted it to be. And what they wanted it to be is expressed through the comprehensive plan, through the Main Street study and previous studies that really folks, I think, wanted it to be more that heart, that center of the community that we don't have. It's great Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and you get a few things on weekends, but if you go there in the evening, everything kind of shuts down, if you will. It's a mix of uses, automotive repair, restaurants, service businesses, and residential homes. And so the idea was to try to say, how do we leverage this money in a thoughtful way to really have enough of an impact to bring about the sort of change that we want, in addition to having just direct benefits for the folks who are there today. And as we discussed those, we came up with really a list of items that were the kind of priority and the focus for those physical improvements that the committee felt would have an impact on bringing about those change. So one area primarily was parking lot improvements. We have heard from folks about the lack of parking downtown, particularly some of those auto-related uses that take up a lot of on-street parking during the day that give the impression there's not really an area to park. There aren't really a lot of parking on site because, again, many of those buildings were converted from residential homes and they're not conducive to adding a lot of parking, and so the idea was have some public parking associated with it. Part of it was when you talk to a lot of folks who aren't from that part of the community or haven't lived in the community a long time, they don't even know where Main Street is. It doesn't have an identity. You know, we're not that county seat community that's got the county square or the courthouse and the county square, or we have that larger Main Street corridor that's maintained its vitality over time. So we struggle a bit with that. So one was to give it a sense of identity with some monumentation signage at the entryways to it. The other was to deal with sidewalks. Again, folks want to be able, if you're going to have to park down the street and walk, or just as folks today want a more walkable environment, we really need to do something in those areas. Obviously, with limitations of funding, it's not redoing every sidewalk, but really focus on filling in the gaps, if you will, where we don't have sidewalks or where the sidewalks are not passable. So again, not fix everything, but get it to where every area has a sidewalk that's passable. Obviously, lighting was a concern, particularly as we try to go from an area that's open Monday through Friday 8 to 5 to being open in the evenings. Becomes all the more important for safety and the atmosphere that creates. We talked about how we deal with street calming. We've got a fairly wide street section which can lead to some higher speeds, can make it more difficult for pedestrians to cross at intersections. So the idea was do some bump outs, if you will, at some areas to frame up the on-street parking, to make the crossing of intersections a bit shorter, to really do something with the surface of the street. It doesn't look great. It's a little bit rough. Again, we've done some things with seal coat lately that we've seen in Arroyo Verde or some other projects to come in and give it a smoother surface and a nicer look. We've talked about really doing some decorative things at key intersections. So you've got some nice aesthetic feature, ornamental benches, trash cans, things like that. And then lastly, some things that give a sense of place or a sense of character. So again, we've talked about building on the history with trains or caboose cars or things like that, but then also bringing in art as well so that it's got that visual aesthetic to it. So the idea, I think, from the committee was let's go out to the folks who are the stakeholders who own property, who own businesses in the area, and let's find out really if the direction we're headed seems correct. So to be clear, it was less of an open-ended public input than it really was kind of comment on the direction we're headed. And really, generally, I think what we heard from folks is the direction you're headed is fine. We heard more emphasis from some folks on some things. Some people are like, you just really need to deal with parking and lighting. If you do that, you're good. We had other people, as you might expect, come back going, no, you really need to deal with the sidewalks. So to some degree, while we heard people with a different emphasis, there wasn't anything that was really contrary to what we had expected. I will say that we heard a fair amount from folks about how we maintain, how we try to mitigate conflicts between uses. As I said, we have residents who live in the area. Part of it were concerns when we try to bring in restaurants, we try to bring in bars, and I think when people say bars, they're not talking about, hey, I'm looking to get in a fight, where do I want to head out to? You know, that the police clearly know by name, hey, this is where we need to have somebody camped out of. But really, it's the place that, you know, maybe after a smooth council meeting, wanting to celebrate how that goes, coworkers want to go out and grab a drink together, or really you want to meet your family after work, or even you can have your kid kind of tag along to the place. So it's the thing that we've seen in other communities with regard to New Braunfels, Bernie, Fredericksburg, that really is geared toward who we have as the folks in the community. So we heard a fair amount from that going forward. We also heard a fair amount about art. I think it was in part because we may have kind of misstepped with some of our examples. If you look at positive with those, they clearly reacted to it and said, what we don't want is something you stand there and go, I don't get it. I don't get what that's about. What they really something is a little bit more relatable, a little more ornamental, things that, again, maybe reflected the community better, that were a little more relatable to folks going forward. So I think that feedback was certainly positive. So the feedback we got was positive. It was, yep, we're generally good with the direction going. I think what we come away with is how we balance those use of funds going forward. But we did get feedback from folks specifically about where do you most want to see some of the entryway monumentation, where do you want to emphasize on kind of intersection improvements on things like that. It was a bit of a mixed bag to some degree. So I think generally what staff came back with is the direction that the committee had set is the direction that the community wants to go, and so move forward with that there is support generally from folks. There was consensus for that. We did also hear about a lot of folks wanting the city to do some things to sort of activate that area. There was a lot of feedback about the Moving on Main project. There was a lot of feedback that we heard about how we tie some of the events we do at Pickerel perhaps over on Main Street, and staff has been working on those things going forward. The last area that we really talked about that we discussed briefly at the council retreat had to do with further that local flavor sort of incentives. We've talked a lot about the fact that we have an economic development corporation that has their focus in terms of generating greater investment in the community, but often these small property owners, it's a different thing. As by way of a story, we had a property owner come forward who's renovating their project who basically needed a telephone pole moved. It was in the way, didn't fit, was problematic, and called on staff to try to help facilitate with GVC to make that happen at a fairly low cost. So it seems like a minor thing, but it has a big impact on folks. And so I think the local flavor kind of goes in with that. To remind you, we do a few things now, but they're really tied to historic. One is we've got the Main Street Improvement Grant, and there's a requirement that those properties be at least 50 years old to meet that historic designation, being in the defined area, things like that. We have the fee waivers for the Main Street area, and then we also have the Main Street Mixed Use District, and then we tried to do some things as of late with the Schertz magazine to help promote Main Street as well. So the idea with the local flavor that we asked about were what were some other incentive programs that would be helpful for folks going forward. And this is generally, from the feedback we got and kind of a menu option, what staff kind of came back with that seems to sort of cover the full range of need that likely everybody would have something they could take advantage of is, one is a facade grant. So essentially it's to deal with the aesthetics of the appearance of the front. So again, it would be a grant designed to go toward the front facade of a building. That's an eligible expense with the Main Street grant, but the Main Street can be used for things that are not necessarily facades. So Main Street can be used for HVAC systems, electrical, plumbing. This would really be able to deal with the surface. So painting, repointing of brick, things like that, bringing it back. The second that other communities have, and this is, I think, been brought up before, is a sign grant. So again, we want folks, obviously one of the keys is for folks to know the business is there. One is we want a sign that fits in with the area. We don't want to go out there and find, you can't miss it, but you can't miss it because it's sort of a garish sign that detracts from the area. And again, often that signage is an expensive thing, and so we've seen people go more they've done it themselves kind of a thing, and it serves a purpose, but it doesn't necessarily convey where we're headed, if you will, going forward. And so having a grant for signage is one area. The other are areas of landscaping and site improvements. So again, it's not the structure itself, but it's dealing with site issues. So maybe we have old parking that was out there. Maybe people want to add decks or outdoor areas to try to activate space. Maybe they want to come in and do something with more of a seating area outside or landscaping. And so the idea would be to do that. To be clear, I don't necessarily want to be paying for plants, because if you don't water them and they die, we're left with nothing. But again, the idea for all of these are to do improvements that generally would be in place and a benefit from one property owner to the next. The idea is that we do this even if the business isn't able to make a go of it. Those things are there and in place, so it's more conducive for somebody else to come in and say, yeah, that concept I think was slightly off. We're going to take it this way and we can make a go of it, and those physical improvements have been in place. The other benefit that has is the aesthetics are really an issue for that area. You can clearly see the folks who have put some time and energy and money into their property, and you can see the properties that haven't had that done. And so by encouraging that money to go into that visible appearance, I think that's part of where that one plays a larger role with that as well. And then the last to do was a bit of a capital investment grant to offset folks who are having to make some improvements that they want to come in and deal with the sidewalk. They may need to deal with something that maybe is a bit of a water or sewer connection or something like that to go as well. What staff's concept is that for each of those, based on kind of looking at other cities and what they've done, we would set different caps on each of those amounts. So for instance, typically we would expect that facade grant, we would probably have the largest amount available to that, somewhere in the range of, $10,000, maybe really $20,000 for that. The others, the sign grant, the capital grant, things like that, a lower amount, a couple $1,000s, and then maybe somewhere in between $5,000, $10,000 for the landscape grant. Now, we would still keep the Main Street grant because it allows us to tap into hot funds as another source to incent this. Going forward, it works for some people, doesn't work for others. And then likely what we would do is we would sort of put a cap on the total amount of grant assistance that folks can get. So really what they've got is that sort of menu option, if you will. They can walk in and go, it's not 50 years old, so that's not available. The facade needs work, so I want to do that one. And then we really need a sign, so let's kind of go with that one. And so we cap them. So the idea is to make this as available to as many people as possible. But again, it would be a matching grant program so that they're making an investment. The city would be matching that going forward. And again, it capped the amount that they can get. The idea with the grants are, even if the business does not make a go of it, or even if there isn't a business there at the time, if it's somebody, frankly, and this has been an issue a little bit for us before, if somebody comes in and says, I'm planning to flip the thing, I'm going to walk in, I'm going to make these improvements, and I'm going to look to sell it, and I think I can to get somebody to come in, that would be eligible for the grant because it gets us what we're after, which is an improved aesthetic and an improved property that's more conducive to having those sort of businesses within the Main Street area, or even residential uses as they may be. Again, it isn't in keeping with our economic development policy, so these would need to be funded through a general fund program that we'd need to work with the city attorney to develop and create. But that would be our idea going forward, is to have the Main Street grant program continue, the fee waivers continue, and then add on the facade grant, the sign grant, the landscaping site grant, and then the capital improvements grant, establish maximum amounts, establish a budget that we'll have each year. So we kind of are capped at the amount the city can spend. It's not an unlimited kind of a thing. And that with that, what we recommend at the start is to just open the thing and see who comes. You may recall we didn't get many people taking advantage of the Main Street grant the first couple of years, and then we got a bunch kind of coming in after that. And so we'd kind of deal with it as a bit first come, first serve. As I've talked a lot about, the problems that you want to have are, we've had people take advantage of it. It seems to be serving its purpose and activating the area, so we want to continue to invest. And at that point, we either look to adjust the money or to open a window for folks to apply, to go, look, between May 1st and May 30th, that's the window to submit your application to try to get it to take advantage of. The problem with that way, we don't want to do it on the front end, is it means if somebody walks in December, you got to wait 6 months. But again, we would monitor it going forward. And so what staff is really in a nutshell recommending is that we work with the Main Street Committee going forward to pull the consultant back in, because we didn't want to have them spending time and money till we decide what we want to do, to get more specific direction on utilizing the funds that we've got going forward, present to council how that would lay out. Likely we would do a public input stage where once the committee has worked with the consultant to sort of, for instance, define the ornamental light fixtures that are probably solar powered, something like that. A couple options. We may have something where we reach out to folks for a very specific, do you like this one or do you like this one, with the committee being fine with both of them, and it's just to get some benefit there. With the bump outs, probably wouldn't go back out for input. It's just not as conducive to getting that. And then staff would flesh out with the attorney and come forward with a recommended budget and all of the detail amount on the local flavor. The local flavor, I would say, the direction we got from the retreat is to target the Main Street area. Now, I will point out real quick, if I can get the overhead working and not spill water on everything. IT's killing me. is what you see before you is the Main Street grant area. And so this is the area where these properties are eligible for the Main Street grant. Part of what we heard from the comprehensive plan for downtown is that we also needed to look to activate areas along FM 78. We haven't done that with the Main Street grant for a number of reasons, but what we'd like to do when we come back with these local flavor is tie out to some key areas on FM 78. We don't think that we'll have so many that it'll dilute the money available for Main Street, but we think that goes to what the plan is about, which how do I activate those corridors into Main Street? And so I think that if you're sitting at an area about to make a turn on 78 and that area looks nicer, I think it helps you continue on that path to turn down to Main Street as opposed to you kind of frankly drive through and go, doesn't look like any investments happen, doesn't look like a lot's going on in this area. Are you even going to think to make that turn? So we would come back with a revised graphic for those local flavor incentives to be eligible in that area. So with that, I'll quit talking and answer questions.
Very good. Council, questions for Mr. James? None? Okay. Mr. Crawford?
What's the cost to have the consultant come back in? How is that?
So they're on contract with us. Again, we pay them as they do work and spend time with it, so we kind of put them on pause, but part of their design fee, that amount, goes to them working with us to say, what do you like, what do you not like, and then doing the full-blown engineering design. So what you don't want to do is have a consultant doing work for you when you don't know what your outcome is at the end of the day. Thank you, Sarah. My apologies to IT. Perhaps I electrocute myself. So that's really what you do. So again, what we try to do, so for instance on the Schertz Parkway project, very clearly define what we wanted. We're out right now for the engineering firm to sort of flesh out the next years of that pavement, the PCI work. It was very clearly defined, here's what we want you looking at. And so that's the issue. It's not costing us anything now, but the idea of putting them on pause was to be able to come back with very clear direction so they're not spinning their wheels and coming back on something that we aren't interested in.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Very good. Then I guess council looks forward to the next steps and what you're going to bring forward to us to consider.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you. All right. The next item is also yours, Mr. James. It is the discussion update regarding Wiederstein Road improvements. You need this here.
All right. So as council knows, you received a letter from Cibolo requesting that we formally participate with them on making improvements to Wiederstein Road, and that would be from Old Wiederstein down to 75. By way of a bit of background, staff has been talking for quite some time about those improvements. They pulled us in before the Cibolo Crossing project started to go over some of the issues associated with water and sewer for that, in terms of road access, things like that going forward. So we've been in conversation with quite a while. We sat down with their initial TIA with them to go over that. We provided comments to them. They've sent us back a revised TIA. And I will say, I think everybody agrees that the sooner we can make improvements to that road, the better it is for everybody as we move forward. The concern or the problem becomes how much of a priority different roads are to each community, to be perfectly honest, and what's going on in those communities that may open up opportunities to fund that going forward. And so part of what we've been doing in the last few weeks is making clear what we're trying to accomplish and why we're trying to accomplish it. So to be very clear from my perspective, the reason the city of Schertz should make this a priority is because we have the ability to leverage some of our funds, as we often do with TxDOT. In this case, it's with Cibolo, to spend a lower amount of money and get a larger amount of improvement. We also think that we can more cost-effectively do that now as opposed to in the future when either 1103's gone under construction and we have a lot of residents from both our community and Cibolo looking for an alternate route, when development has occurred in that area and we're trying to go back and build when development's occurred on both sides going forward. But to be clear, the primary reason for us is not to incent a project in Cibolo, it's to make an improvement now that has a larger benefit to our residents, particularly when 1103 goes under construction. So in terms of the conversations we've had going forward, the general direction from staff is that we would recommend the City of Schertz put up to $1 million toward those improvements. Now, Cibolo has estimated those may be upwards of about $4.6 million. Cibolo would be responsible for ensuring the rest are put up. That's around 22%, slightly off, but essentially what we would do, because Cibolo has come to us with this request, because they would be responsible for making sure the design is done per our thoroughfare plan and oversee the construction, is that since they're responsible for it, if there's a cost overrun or the estimate isn't correct, that should reasonably be on them because we're not in charge of the project. We haven't come up with that estimate, and so that's a bit of that comes with it. However, if it comes in less, if they were very cautious and said 4.6, but really it comes in at 4, we would be capped at our percentage, so we're not paying a larger portion of our part. Part of that is, as you know, Cibolo has a development Cibolo Crossing is in that they are able to work with to incent to make that contribution. To be clear and clarify for folks in our community, the EVO project does not extend down to Wiederstein. It is 17 acres that's up by Bussey's. It doesn't come all the way down. So the City of Schertz doesn't presently have a project to tap into. So what I will say, and council has asked this, worst case scenario is you need to assume that money would come out of general fund. Now, the bond language for the CO bonds that we propose to issue next month for road improvements initially were slated for the PCI, for those road repair and road improvements. The way the bond language was worded, we have the ability to tap those to put into this project. So if it comes down to it, and it very likely may, we put it into making this improvement with that funding. So there is a source of funding we can tap into. However, we'd reserve the right that if we get a project or if we're able to do something with EDC or a private developer, we may be able to slide in a different $1 million for that to keep our money for road repairs. But as a worst case scenario, it likely staff would say assume it would come out of that bond funding up to $1 million. That would get us, as I said, based on their estimates, a full build-out of Wiederstein from Old Wiederstein with the intersection there all the way down to the frontage road of 35 per the city's thoroughfare plan. I will say that we have the ability as a city to collect roadway impact fees from folks in the future who would develop in our community. But again, we've heard folks talk about you're going to need to look at Old Wiederstein as well. So again, you may recall it's going to take a while to accumulate monies, and then we didn't charge the maximum necessarily, so we're not going to necessarily get as much in. So we're going to always be tight for road money, I think, but certainly that'll help and be able to come in. So part of the reason we're not offering up, well, let's just pay half, is because we've got a bunch of other roads we need to improve, and we've got other roads that, frankly, we've got a lot of residents who are driving on or are going to drive on. Maskey Road with the soccer complex is an issue. Many of y'all have probably received calls from residents about that. Eckert Road with the development that's going on up there of Cypress Point and Parklands is going to be an issue of need to make improvements. And then again, as you heard folks say here, the section of Old Wiederstein from here down to 1103. So there's opportunity cost in part of it because we don't have that project. This is what we feel like we need to do. Again, part of it is that the bulk of the traffic today is Cibolo residents. There are some of ours, but the bulk of it's Cibolo residents, coming down Cibolo Valley. And then again, when you look at the TIA from their project that they have that's under construction at the intersection, generates a significant amount of traffic kicked onto this, and thus that's the case. So that would be the general framework. Now, what our position is, and I think I'll be blunt, and I may misread council, but what staff feels like we've kind of heard from council is where possible, let's make a wise investment to solve a problem, not throw some money after it, but still have a problem and not have people satisfied and then have to probably spend more money going forward. And so what we have also talked to the City of Cibolo about is approaching TxDOT, and we have done that. City of Schertz has done that and in fact had a meeting with them yesterday to walk them through this. And much like the other things that we've done, we've said City of Schertz and City of Cibolo are partnering to make a significant investment. So $4.6 million to get Wiederstein done because of the development, and TxDOT has seen those TIAs. They go to TxDOT as well for their review. And then we are proposing another $500,000 from each city. So again, up to $1.5 million from Schertz, up to $4.1 million from the City of Cibolo to try to deal with the actual intersections of Wiederstein and 35, both the north and southbound intersections, because cars aren't going to stop and the traffic's not going to stop right there. It's much why TxDOT with the 1103 project said, that's great, but then I'm going to have a bottleneck at the overpass. We need to do that. The issue here is, while we think you could get 3 lanes out of that overpass, you clearly could not get more than that, and it's a skew as well. The other is if we're doing all this construction, and I tend to be a bit more Machiavellian with that, it's a bit, let's bite the bullet, let's slog through it for a window, and then let's have it done, as opposed to we do one, and just as people say, yay, they did the nice ribbon cutting, road looks great, we see the TxDOT crews show up and start tearing up the overpass, then we don't get the benefit from it. And so we tend to do that sort of thing. Where possible, again, we've closed down roads to traffic. We've worked with Comal ISD on Hubertus for that. We've done that a bit on Eckert Road, or are going to do that with them on those improvements. It's a bit of that mantra, let's get it done in a shorter window, even if it's a bit more painful than dragging the thing out 3 times as long. And again, we'd recommend that. So the idea is to approach TxDOT saying, you know, we are making this significant investment of over $5.5 million. Is there a way TxDOT has the ability to bring funding forward to do the overpass at the same time, so that at the end of the day, after all of that, residents go, that was horrible, but now traffic moves freely the whole time. And again, we're leveraging our investment. So TxDOT has the work they're doing, as you guys know, with the managed lane project for 35 and some of the overpass and some of the other projects. So it's to see if they could be able to move that forward. So part of our agreement with Cibolo is if we're going to agree on Wiederstein from Old Wiederstein to 35, they need to agree to kick in the extra money and support us on going to TxDOT. Let's fix the problem all the way, because you're going to have people coming from the north to go to Cibolo Crossing, to go to development in our community, and you're going to have people leaving both directions as well. It's one of those nights. Can you use a little more paper towel, Dudley?
Hey, Mr. James, here's a lid.
I'm so excited about all this progress we're making. So that would be the second, is that if we agree to deal with this section, Cibolo agrees to step up on the next section. And then lastly, and I want to clarify on this, for us, the reason to do it, if we're going to make this commitment, and because we are going to have to put forth dollars to ensure they're there, and there's an opportunity cost with that, and as we've talked about on some other things, when that money starts getting drawn down, we have got to know the project gets finished. Much as we've talked about a number of years ago with private developers who come in and say, let me file the plat now, I'll build the public improvements while I'm building this. We're fairly risk averse, and so the idea would be is that the monies for this project, and I want to be clear, and I clarified this with Bob Herrera today because it's not laid out in the report. Our assumption was when we say go on this, they're going to need us to put up our money and park it somewhere so they know it's there and they know they have access to it, and we don't come back and go, oh, I couldn't. Just take that. So that they know those funds are available. And that's a reasonable, fair thing, but there's an opportunity cost for parking that money there. And if our goal is to do this to get it before 1103 goes under, we've got to have benchmarks that have to be hit. And frankly, once I do that, everybody needs to be in. So our expectation is that Cibolo would reach agreement where their money is parked in an escrow account, and if those benchmarks for timeframes are not met, there's not a good reason, and we'll have a reason to discuss it and whatnot. But if we feel the project is stalled out and they've missed those deadlines they've agreed to, we have the ability to pick up the project, tap into their funds, and move it forward. I just can't, and I can't recommend that we take that risk on. And so I think we'll find a way to do that as we go forward with that project. So what we're really looking for tonight is direction from council to say and again, to be clear, I get devil's in the details. So this is not a carte blanche approval, but based on what we understand now, we are comfortable that we are open with that sort of an agreement. We'll need to see the final document to make the arrangements so that we can move forward. The last thing, though, and this has been an issue for a while, is Cibolo has also requested that that section of Wiederstein be renamed to Cibolo Valley Drive. And again, I will say this. We've got 4 or 5, 6, half dozen sections, if you will, of roads somehow called Wiederstein. That can be confusing for residents in the back. It can also be an issue for emergency services, particularly if you've got somebody trying to call in an accident and going, I'm looking up and I don't know what it's called. And then frankly, the thing I would say is, as we know, Cibolo doesn't have much frontage on 35. And they don't have a road that has Cibolo on it. So when you're driving up 35, you see a road with their name, that means something. And so in light of that, from a staff perspective, we don't have a problem with naming the road Cibolo Valley Drive. We throw in the agreement. We may want to reserve the right to be able to call it an honorary name, much as Roy Richard Parkway is FM 3009 or something like that if we need it. And certainly, to be clear, when it goes on the other side of 35 and it's all Schertz, we'll probably name it something else over there. But again, it has the benefit of avoiding confusion for everybody. And frankly, now they have a road that touches 35 that has the word Cibolo in it, which understandably, I can see why they would want that. So it's sort of a show of working together. And I'll be clear for residents, I appreciate the comments. We work together with Cibolo a lot. I think there's a very good working relationship among staff. We've done a lot of projects together. Very often the first question is, how can we help one another out? And so I wouldn't take, maybe as we try to figure out how we do this, to be anything indicative of an issue between the communities. It really is different communities, different priorities. We've got different ways to fund this going forward. And that's sort of the issue there. I will say that our agreement would be with the city of Cibolo. I'm not recommending we do a deal with Fasken Oil, who's the developer of their project. However, they want to structure an agreement with them on the back end to do it, make it happen. But our agreement would be with Cibolo. They probably will likely have another agreement. But again, the key is we would be willing to put up our funds in escrow. They would need to do the same thing. If they don't hit benchmarks, we can keep the thing moving, because our interest is not in sending a commercial project. It's getting a road in before 1103 gets bad for our residents. And there's two. So with that, I'll be quiet.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. James. Usually I'll defer to council before making a comment, but I'm going to start us off this time. This is something that City of Schertz and City of Cibolo have been talking about for a number of years. To my memory, at a minimum, it's been on and off for 5 years. The biggest challenge that we've had over that time has been resources, and that really should be heard as dollars, impetus, and timing. And we had not had, up until now, really a convergence of availability of funds, of clear need, and of mutually beneficial timing. I think we've arrived at that point, however, and so I personally support taking this forward to Cibolo. Many of you know that years and years ago I was adamantly opposed to ever changing the name Wiederstein Road to anything at all, but having done a little bit of asking around and research and realizing that from a police dispatch or an emergency services dispatch view, having 3 different roadways in the city of Schertz named Wiederstein is a challenge. And the public safety aspect of it is what has moved my thinking away from there's no reason for us to change this name to if it adds clarity to where our first responders are to go, then it's a good change. I think that overall, given the letter that we received from the city of Cibolo that talked about the number of Cibolo residents and the number of Schertz residents that use the road, the division of cost is appropriate. I do want to make sure council does realize that as we maintain ownership of this road, maintenance out into perpetuity is on our nickel. So we will be developing a stretch of road that may cost $4.6 million, but that means we own the maintenance of that as well. That is not going to be a small ticket item as we go. That said, I still support taking this to the city of Cibolo. I do believe that we have an opportunity to make an act of good faith cooperation between our cities to solve for a challenge in an equitable manner. And when we can do that, and everybody gets a win out of it, it's something that we should pursue and should move forward with. That said, I need to stop and counsel Mr. Gutierrez.
Who oversees the construction of the road?
So the way we would do it is we would have that charged with Cibolo. That Cibolo effectively. Now, Cibolo could do it through Fasken. They could contract them themselves. But essentially, you know, what we don't want are too many cooks in the kitchen. Our requirement would be it comply with our thoroughfare standards and our public works manual standards, so it gets built to our standard. But essentially, it's their project to build and their project to manage, and they deal with all the daily headaches and things like that. And I think in part that makes sense because they've been the ones doing the work to say the estimated cost is this and some of those things associated. So they're better positioned to go more quickly. But again, we all want authority, we all want responsibility, we all want a little bit of power. But with that comes, you know, it falls to you to make it happen.
Okay.
And I think they're comfortable with that. I haven't heard them say that's an issue.
Is it going to be a 4-lane with a medium? Any idea?
It's a 4-lane divider. I'm not sure. You know, we'll look at where we think we have drive cuts. It may not be a raised median because of so many cuts coming off there, but it will comply with our thoroughfare plans section, cross section.
My last question is, does it include a light at Old Wiederstein and Cibolo Valley Road?
Yeah, I believe that was included in it. Again, we've got to make, with the TIA, we've got to get a final clean TIA, but I think everybody's confident that that final TIA will show that that's warranted.
So these funds will include that one?
So they are assuming the signal cost is included within that. Yeah, I've got to get a final, I'm only waffling, I'm not trying to waffle, but the caveat is, till we all sign off on a final traffic impact analysis that shows it meets the warrants, I can't say that it will. That being said, I could not see how a valid TIA would not show that it wouldn't meet the warrants for the signal. And so
Thank you.
that would include that as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
So, Brian, we talked about the turnaround. So are we going to have the turnarounds included with the 500 additional, 500,000 put up by both cities?
So we'll see what we can get with that. Again, the idea is to have TxDOT come in. What we're trying to do is get everything built to full build-out condition the best we can. So much as we saw with 1103, hey, can we get the turnarounds in? It's great to get the turnarounds in now. We would like to do that here because we think that really helps the volume of traffic. So what you could have, though, is we could go to TxDOT, and TxDOT says, yeah, we just don't have the money, can't come up with the money, don't want to come up with the money to redo the overpass. They may come up with, we can come up with part of the money, we don't have enough to do the turnarounds, but we can expand the section. Or they may come back and say, if we can get you guys to kick in more money, we have the ability to do that improvement. So we'll have to see where we get with that.
So will you go back to Cibolo at that point, or should we go back to Cibolo at that point and say, hey, we're putting in 500, you're putting in 500, they need more money, can you raise your cap?
So we will go back and ask that of them. Again, if I were Cibolo, and I'm being blunt, much as I've said, hey, look, I'm capped at $1 million on the section of Wiederstein. If it's less, I pay less. If it's more, y'all pay it. If I were Cibolo, I probably wouldn't give a blank check and say, per the agreement, we can agree to more. We can go back to Cibolo and make that request, and they may say, yeah, we've got the funds to do it. Yeah, we think we benefit. Or they may say, you know, we're tapped out, or we think that's less benefit for us, and sorry, Schertz, we're not going to do more. We'll go back and have that conversation. But again, in light of the fact that we're putting in $1 million for the reasons we are of this 4.6, you know, it's not unreasonable for if it comes back and we go, hey, I need another 300,000. Cibolo goes, well, you guys kick it in because you're still paying a lot less than we are for this whole thing. So we'll ask.
So short game, long game.
Right.
We gain in the short term, but as we know, we'll pay the maintenance on this road and forever.
That's right.
However, when it comes down to kicking in money for TxDOT to do the turnarounds, that 500,000 is not going to be enough. We know that. Now, TxDOT may come back and say, why wouldn't both entities put more money or more capital up? I think we ought to word it so that we would be able to go back to them and have some kind of leeway versus just saying, hey, look, you're putting in your portion and that's it now, because we still pick up the maintenance.
Yeah. We can certainly put in there that they have to have discussions if TxDOT says more money is needed. Again, we can put language in that they have to be willing to talk with us about that. I'll be blunt. I think what our hope is that TxDOT says this is something that we would be doing in the future. If I can just find the money to do it now, that's where it would happen. If TxDOT says it's not something we're planning to do and it's so far out, what I think we're trying to do is how do we move up that money that they have planned to be spent, or find money now for what they will anticipate spending a number of years from now when they do the managed lanes and when they do the overpass and things like that.
So that road is not cut all the way through just yet on the other side of 35. So when it goes through, are we anticipating them asking for that to be Cibolo Valley Drive, or is that going to be Hal Baldwin Parkway, or how are we going to do
I've
that?
never heard them ask for that to be Cibolo Valley Drive, and we've always been very clear that, hey, once it crosses 35, it changes. Again, I think what they really want is a road that has Cibolo on it that leads into their community. They don't have a need for a road saying Cibolo heading off into Schertz.
So has anyone talked to TxDOT about that? Because typically there's consistency on 35 on the interstate highway system. They have consistency with, if it's Cibolo going one way, it's typically Cibolo going the other way.
It's not always. Cities can name those different. So while occasionally you get the same thing. So to be blunt, we may come back and we may say in the future, hey, we found something else to name after Hal Baldwin. We're running out of names. We're waiting for Mayor Carpenter to pass away so we can name something after him. But
no.
So we will have that. TxDOT, the naming is up to us. Again, you sometimes see that where you pull off and one is one. I will say there's a drawback to that because then people are going, not familiar with the area, which is which way and which is the other. But we have the ability to name it something else, and TxDOT wouldn't oppose that.
So I got to tell you, people say that people are, I guess there's this overarching thing that we don't work together. And I can certainly tell you, we have worked together more so in the past 10 years that I've been on this council, almost 10. We have worked together more than anyone else in the whole region, from what I see. We've always been in a position being able to help our neighbors, and I think this is one of those opportunities where we're able to foster some goodwill. And why do we do it? We do it because it's the right thing to do. So I don't have a problem with this going forward. But I want to make sure that we're clear that the maintenance will be ours forever. And those questions about will it be named Cibolo Valley Drive on the other side of 35, I want that answered first.
Yes, devil's in the details, and so we'll lay that out specifically to avoid confusion.
So it's almost a no-brainer, Mr. Mayor, that we should definitely go forward with this.
Anyone else? Mr. Crawford?
Mr. James and Mayor Carpenter, I'm going to need some guidance on what I say. You and I didn't get a chance to talk about it today, Brian.
Yes, sir.
We were both hungry. And the mayor can explain a couple of things because I'm going to need some help. We've had three things happen that are good for the city, I think. 1103 intersection and 1103 in general. Then Santikos / Cibolo Crossing development, and then followed very closely by Evo. That's going to make the Wiederstein intersection and 1103 have tons and tons of traffic. I-35, that's going to open up the other side of 35, maybe, hopefully. It might cause very much sooner than we thought. 2252 coming across 35 and going into a Wiederstein Road or whatever the Master Thoroughfare Plan says. It'll cause the traffic on Old Wiederstein Road, which Mr. Bolter and I are certainly You and I have been talking about it for 14 months at least, and certainly the people who live over there are concerned about the traffic on Old Wiederstein Road. It's going to cause all that increase, certainly for the development time to get 1103 finished, and probably additionally because of Santikos and Evo and whatever else is going to happen in that particular area over the next 4 years or 5 years or whatever. I think it's going to happen much sooner than we anticipated, certainly a year ago or a year and a half ago. That being said, as a stage, the $4.6 million to do Wiederstein Road to Old Wiederstein Road, and the $1 million that we kick in, and this is where I'm going to need the mayor's help when I get through talking. If he would, either one of you can explain, or both of y'all, why can't we look at? Well, it's one of the pieces before I go that road. We also have to find $1 million to pay for this, another $500,000 to pay for the improvements with TxDOT, and possibly some more money, which might be, would certainly make good sense to have a turnaround at Wiederstein Road right now and those kind of things. So we're not exactly sure what the final cost is going to be. When it comes to moving money around, you've got more knowledge than I do, and so do some other people in the room here. What if we didn't give $1 million to Cibolo, but we said, you take the road, you give us our curb cuts on the north side, northeast side of Wiederstein Road from 35 to Wiederstein Road, whatever we need for our development, because that's all commercial, as I understand the plat. And as our development comes along, which will happen, I think, a lot sooner than we thought, along Wiederstein Road, we take the impact fees for the road and give that to Cibolo. These kind of concepts, so that we don't spend $1 million now that we're going to have to find anyway. We take it out of impact fees that we're going to get paid, give them to Cibolo, and that saves us some money up front. Things like that that might make it less onerous on us for having to look for money right this second, because we still need to look for money for our own other items on roads and streets that we're trying to do. And my comments are made, that's why I need the mayor to, I've heard Cedric say and the mayor say that we need to keep the ownership of Wiederstein Road. I don't know why. I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying, how can we use other money from impact fees? Because I'm willing to bet lunch that Cibolo isn't paying $3.6 million of this money to put the road in, because I bet the developer wants that road in pretty bad. Right. I'd want it if I were the developer. I wouldn't want to pay for it necessarily, but I certainly would want to have it there. So I'm trying to say what I just said, but I don't know if what I said makes any sense. But if it gives us a way to delay spending $1 million, and because we're always looking for money, I tease y'all about looking for money for the police department, for more officers, but this is a big hunk of money, and we know we're going to have to find it somewhere. And how long can we do C of O's bonds to take care of everything we need to do? I know we're working to try to get a lot of things done that need to be fixed. I'm not complaining. I'm just asking. So if the road could be transferred to Cibolo with some conditions, and I don't know what all the conditions would be, but that might be a good trade, because we want to have Wiederstein fixed, Old Wiederstein fixed, and whatever else needs to be fixed in the next 5 or 7 years based on the growth we're expecting. Because I know we're going to have other roads have to be put in on along the 35 frontage. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to turn the floor over to you if you have some comments about why we don't want to keep the road or why we do want to keep the road. What are the things in there that I don't know, that I don't realize, that might be extremely important to the future development of our city? Because everybody sitting on this dais has a concern for doing the right thing for the city of Schertz. This is an economic development issue. It's extremely important. But how do we do it and maximize our dollars and not give something away that I'm talking about that may not make any sense? And I don't have the knowledge and the depth of experience that Mr. James and the mayor have, and maybe Mr. Edwards.
I think largely it's a policy question first and foremost. And what is today Wiederstein Road and what may tomorrow be Cibolo Valley Drive going from Old Wiederstein to 35 is a tangible asset. And I don't, while it may cost us money over time to maintain that asset, I am definitely not in favor of giving that asset to another municipality. There's too much value in the long-term control of that stretch of road, in no small part in giving us the opportunity to control the curb cuts on our side as our side begins to develop over time. There may come a time down the road, so to speak, pardon that, where we have a different idea of what we want to do with that road, that there may be opportunities for a redesign, for a change. And if we don't have control, that means that our destiny with regard to that road and how it impacts the city of Schertz is not in our hands any longer. And so for those reasons by themselves, without going into the a philosophical discussion about expending taxpayer money to improve an asset and then giving that asset away, I think that long term, our control over that asset, and again, particularly in the impact that it can have on the development on our side of that road, the curb cut controls, etc., it's critical that we maintain control of that asset over the long term, rather. As to saving money now by giving away that asset so that we can repurpose money to do work on Old Wiederstein Road, I would say that let's proceed poco a poco, right? A little at a time. Let's solve for Old Wiederstein to 35 in a deal with Cibolo. Let's get that underway. Let's work with TxDOT on the bridge. And let's, as we have done with Wiederstein, be patient and see what unfolds as far as development on our corner that may allow us to use economic development corporation funds as opposed to general funds or bonds to fix Old Wiederstein. Let's play a chess game and play the long game rather than look for an all-in-one right now. I think Cibolo has asked us for assistance on Wiederstein Road. Let's offer up this deal. Let's get this deal closed. And over time, as we've done with Wiederstein, and I know I'm repeating myself, let's watch and see what happens. And there will be a confluence of things, a confluence of timing and of need and of available resources to address Old Wiederstein. That would be my policy counsel going forward. Mr. Edwards.
I have another question on that.
Mr. Edwards, go ahead.
Real quick, will there be a memorandum of understanding with a clawback provision saying that if this does not go well, we can claw this item back?
So we'll likely do, we'll work with the attorney, an interlocal agreement, Dan? Yeah, an ILA. Good, see, I got that one right. We'll do an interlocal agreement. The way we've thought about structuring it is certainly there'll be provisions for either community to default. What I have talked with Mr. Herrera about is to be clear that we establish some benchmarks for things to happen. When's the design improved? When does construction start? When does construction at this point? When does it hit this point? When does it hit this point? We've got provisions in there for notice that they have not hit a provision. We come and, however we do it formally, tell them, hey, you missed this deadline, and if you miss it by more than this, then this happens. What we would like to work out is that if it stalls out, if you will, missing these deadlines, we have the ability to likely direct the contractor and use that money to make those improvements. So we'll have to work with the attorneys how we do that. So it's from our perspective, while we may need that, it's less about pulling our money back than being able to hold our money and Cibolo's money and make the thing happen to get it finished. Worst case scenario for us is we parked a bunch of money there, we spent a bit of it, and the road doesn't get built. So it's not about clawing back, it's about forcing the project to occur. Okay. That's really what I think we're going to most focus on. But there likely will be some way to get out if we so choose.
And for the same reasons Mr. Mayor just said, I cannot see us turning over a piece of property or a road that we own when we know that there's going to be commercial development there eventually, and of course the sales tax and also the property tax that will come from that. It will benefit not only us but our school district as well and all of our residents. I think it's wisdom for us to maintain control of that road and stay in control of the cue ball.
Anyone on this end before I go back down to the other ends? Mr. Davis?
I agree with the mayor and Councilman Edwards. I think, I certainly don't have a problem with renaming it. I think, road maintenance going forward is something we plan for, and the reality of it is if it's built right from the start, you're not going to have any real maintenance on it for a long time. So as long as it's being built to handle not just the residential traffic that would be out there, but if you look at what they plan on doing on their side and what could happen on the other side of the road for us with the curb cuts that we would need someday in the future, if it can handle the truck traffic, it's built right, I'm not worried about the maintenance in the long term. My only other question I had before was we talked about the overpass. I was going to ask if the cost of the 1103 bridge, but during the discussion I looked it up, that was about 7.2 mil.
Right.
So we're looking at proposing, like we did on 1518, $1 million, $1.5 million or so,
Yeah.
as enticement money,
Right.
for TxDOT to see if they can come up with the other. I would imagine it wouldn't be much more different to do that overpass the same as 1103.
Yeah, I would hope not. But yeah, order of magnitude, it's probably $7 million. And so really what we're trying to do with TxDOT is say, hey, we're willing to put in a bit of money. Is there a way you can move up funds to make something happen that's needed in the future? Yes, sir.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Very good. Well, Mr. Crawford?
Thank you. A couple of things. Go back to the start of this. How much do we know how much money the developer is going to put in on this out of this 4.6? Everybody know that answer?
On the Cibolo side?
Yes.
So we don't know. My impression, and I could be very wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'll come back next meeting and tell you Mr. Erg clarified, but my impression is they are doing what we would likely have done, which is to get the developer to front it, and then they would likely, through an incentive agreement, pay that developer back either through a 380 agreement or impact fee credits or something like that. So again, I think Cibolo is a lot in our position. They don't have a lot of money sitting around burning a hole in their pocket. And so as we've often done, it's get the developer to build it and pay for it and then pay the developer back over time. But I'm not privy to those, and I don't know quite how they structured it. And they may not have formally done that. So again, very clearly, it's my impression. Could be wrong. Call Bob and ask him if you want to know for sure.
Okay. That being said, since we don't know how much money Cibolo is putting in, there's no way, because we don't have any development going on the other side of the street, to have any EDC money or impact fees to use to cover our $1 million expense or $1.5 million expense. Is that a correct statement, or am I off base a little bit?
That's slightly off. So
Okay.
again, you need a project to be able to use EDC funds to kick in, though we will certainly continue to have those conversations with EDC and the attorney and make sure, but we don't run afoul. Ironically, we do have about $65,000 in roadway impact fee money for this service area that we could kick in towards this. So we have started collecting some. People will be happy. So we've got a little bit, but essentially the issue is I don't have a project yet in that area, and I haven't collected more impact fees beyond that. But if at such time, and again, part of how we'd structure our deal is if I put up initially general fund money or general fund backed bond money, I would have the ability to slot in different money in exchange for that. So if I got a project that came in, I could get the developer to kick the money in and then reimburse them the same way maybe Cibolo's doing, or as I collect roadway impact fee money, I can replace the general fund money with that. So we would structure the agreement. Again, Cibolo's going to want to know, hey, you got your $1 million and $1.5 million maybe, but I've got the ability to move in different monies from different sources as long as I maintain them.
So doing a COO bond is not necessarily bad, because you could use that money, and then when you get your impact fees, you could use the impact fee money to pay back the COO bond. Is that a reasonable? What do we do to cover so we're not getting in any kind of trouble?
Sure. So the impact fee ordinance allows us to pay ourselves back for money we spend, non-roadway impact fee money, for roads. So I've got the ability to use it to repay myself. Now, the part of the problem, though, is I've got a whole bunch of other road needs, and is it really robbing Peter to pay Paul, or I'm just kind of calling one another, as opposed to then we all say, well, what do we do on Old Wiederstein, and I have that money for that. So we have that flexibility to do that with roadway impact fee money to repay ourselves as we go forward, if we so choose to. Or we may say, well, put that money toward Maskey, otherwise I'd be using general fund money toward Maskey, and so 6.5 doesn't.
I'm just looking for ways to not spend money now. I understand the issues that the mayor brought up about ownership and control. Control is sometimes very, very important. The road doesn't generate any tax revenue to begin with, so that's not an issue at all. But it is a vehicle. Will the TIA, the Transportation Impact Analysis, include all the commercial stuff that's going to be going down Cibolo Valley Drive once it's completed all the way to I-35?
So first, on your earlier kind of comment, staff agrees. Our focus is if we can use a particular source of funds for something for which that is designated a narrower use, we are going to do that. The last thing we want to do is spend general fund money, because general fund money can be used to hire police officers, firefighters, gives us the most flexibility. So we're on the same page with that. Your second question is what, with regard to the TIA, and I'm sorry, repeat it because I've lost my train.
Does that include all the, when they do that analysis, that includes all the 18-wheelers and whatever kind of trucks are going to be going over that road that affect how well it has to be built and how long it lasts?
No, not really. The TIA is designed to anticipate how much traffic a project will generate on a road, and it looks at how much traffic's there today and how much background traffic occurs in the intervening time till that's built. So it really looks at volume of traffic, degradation of level of service, and what improvements need to be made to maintain or achieve particular levels of service. You know, we have street design standards in our public works manual that spell out how roads have to be built. You know, where we have particular issues are not roads like 1103, Wiederstein, Schertz Parkway, Eckert Road, Maskey, things like. They're going to get truck traffic going to construction sites while construction's occurring. They're going to get delivery truck traffic down the road, and they're going to residential construction traffic. They're going to get a mix of both. And so you would typically design your roads to accommodate all of that. Where you want to do something different is particularly where you have an industrial area that is all truck traffic, and all of that truck traffic, if you notice, is making a turning movement. The things that tear up our streets, so if you look at cul-de-sacs where you start getting failure, it's, to be blunt, it's from the garbage trucks and not their fault. It's the garbage trucks going around, making that turn a couple times a week, pushing that asphalt out. So again, it'll be built to our normal spec. I think what we would say is it needs to be built right, i.e. to our spec, and our engineering department has and will continue to look where those specs need to adjust. You know, going forward, again, we have a common problem with subsurface water. Not sure we've got it as much up there, but the key is that this would be built to our city standard and built correctly, and if it's done, then the road should hold up. We don't have a concern about our standard not being correct, because everybody knew when we came up with that you'd have a lot of commercial traffic there. That's not a surprise.
Thank you.
You know, to the point that's been brought up both directly and tangentially by multiple members of council with regard to the maintenance of the road and to what quality standards it would be built, I think Cibolo has an ordinance that limits the weight of vehicles that drive on that traverse Cibolo Valley Drive. Maybe we should have that discussion as part of our discussion, whether it be as part of this deal, whether it be after this deal, so that we match up city ordinances so that the same restriction on weight or truck types is the same all the way through. I'm sure that Cibolo doesn't want, 50,000-pound 18-wheelers driving up and down Cibolo Valley Drive any more than we would want it on our section and the damage that it could cause.
Understood. We can certainly have those discussions. I would keep in mind that when we push those trucks off enough roads, we've then concentrated them on other roads in delivery. But I think it's a worthy thing to look at.
If they've already got an ordinance in place, then it's something we should probably look at and make sure that, we're on the same page with them, whatever that may be. It's part of the ongoing and continuing discussion and negotiation.
I agree with that, yes, sir.
Okay,
Ideally, that truck traffic should use 3009 and 1103.
It sounds to me from commentary from council that while we are concerned and would like to see a final deal that's put in front of us with an interlocal agreement, that council is desirous of making this offer and beginning a negotiation with our friends in Cibolo to solve for the Wiederstein problem.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone. All right, next item that we have on the agenda this evening, a discussion regarding social media and the use of technology by the City Council, and this was requested by Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola. So, Dr. Scagliola, I'm going to give you the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. This is going to be uncharacteristic of me. Usually I tell you a long story and finally play the Paul Harvey thing, and now you know the rest of the story. I'm not going to do that tonight. I'm going to cut right to the chase. For this particular item, I propose we establish a focus action group composed of a few council members and some interested residents to explore guidelines for using social media by members of our council that protects the rights of our members, mitigates legal and ethical challenges, is responsive to the needs of our residents, and promotes the good of our community. Now, here's why I believe a committee like this is needed. First, we recently adopted a social media policy for employees. And I do not want to be viewed as a do as I say, not as I do type of a leader. I believe the senior leadership in any organization must set the example. Second, Section 4 of our City Council Code of Ethics is titled City Council Media Communication Guidelines. So some guidelines already exist. Essentially, the section states, A, effective media relations best serve the city by providing accountability to the public and transparency of government, ensuring accurate information is conveyed to the public. Section B, council members and the mayor have been elected to represent our community and are free to speak to the media on any subject. These guidelines are intended to ensure accurate, consistent information is provided to the media while preserving the City Council's integrity and professional image. Section C1, council members and the mayor have the right to express personal opinions on any issue, but must make it clear that they are speaking for themselves, are not speaking in an official capacity for the city, and are not speaking on behalf of the City Council. Now, I fully support individual rights and freedoms and have absolutely no desire to deprive anybody of their right to speak or their right to be heard. That being said, I also believe that our rights, that when it comes to our rights, we as elected officials have an obligation and a responsibility to hold ourselves to a higher standard and focus not only on our individual rights, but also on doing what is right for the good of our community. I'm not looking to dictate, punish, or mandate compliance standards. My intention is simply to expand our media communications guidelines to address the opportunities and challenges associated with social media. Specifically, I think we need to explore the legal and ethical aspects of using social media as an informational communications platform. And how can we avoid violating the Open Meetings Act, the Open Records Act? How can we avoid getting into liability, pending litigation, or ongoing discussions of investigations? How can we avoid getting wrapped up with the drama of personal or personnel affairs? Second, how can we ensure the information presented to our community is open, honest, and transparent? Third, what's the most appropriate source of information? Where does it come from? And who exactly has the authority to speak on behalf of the city and the city staff? And finally, what guidelines are needed to ensure our commentary reflects favorably upon our community, our residents, our employees, senior staff, and us as leaders. As I said, I have no nefarious intentions, no hidden agenda. I believe these are valid concerns, and I am confident that we can reach consensus and draft acceptable guidelines if we do so as a team, working together, focused on the tenets of trust, respect, understanding accountability, our responsibility, and working towards a common goal. Now, I provided some information, and Ms. Brenda did attach it to our agenda package. I believe it's relevant and an appropriate representation of the guidelines we could adopt. Once again, if it pleases the council, I propose we establish a focus action group to explore guidelines for using social media by members of our city council. That's all I have, sir.
Anyone else? Mr. Edwards?
I'd like to get an opinion from our attorney on a couple of things. Mr. Santee, Mr. Zek came and told us that we should stay away from social media altogether. As a matter of fact, he said that we should probably even not be friends with each other on social media. I have a question because Mr. Bolch brought up a great point. He said a position paper. He said, why not have something in a position paper, but would that relieve us from having a potential quorum issue with the position paper?
No, not having a position paper is not going to alleviate whether or not a quorum exists. The position paper would, I'm assuming what you're referring to is an expression of your intent. Is it
correct?
But that's still going to be open to interpretation.
Okay, by the Open Meetings Act.
That's correct.
Okay. Last thing, when can we separate ourselves from our duties as a council member? Is that after we've lost our election or been unseated? Am I right or wrong?
I would agree with that.
Okay, those are the only two questions I have.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Social media. How many times has Donald Trump offended people? You know, the only thing is that we know is that who determines what's offensive? Because this subject matter is strictly subjective. An objective perspective is one that is not influenced by emotions, opinions, or personal feelings. The only fact we know is that someone posted something, and that has the potential of offending anyone, regardless of what it is. It will offend someone. You know, regarding the city's, the city of the city of Schertz, the posting, the departments already have the responsibility of assigning members of who's going to post something there. You know, many elected officials want to embrace social media to better communicate with their constituents. And some have indeed exercised that bad judgment. You know, we as elected officials are accountable to our constituents and must abide by the Open Meetings Act. I cannot and will not allow my fellow council members to dictate what I can and I cannot allow to be posted on social media. Who are we to judge? Judgment will be administered during the next election.
Mr. Larson?
I had some people ask me, what are you going to say on this topic? And I said, initially I said, you know, it's a discussion. We've talked about it. I've made my points clear. I don't think I'm going to say anything. But what I've heard is a lot more concerning than I thought the worst case scenario was. I mean, the guidelines being proposed, things I heard were ensuring, I got to look at my notes because I'm just a little flabbergasted, assuring that a communication of an individual council member is open, honest, and transparent. Now, why would it be concerning that we would want to regulate whether or not a council member's comments are open, honest, and transparent? Well, who determines what's open, honest, and transparent? And if you think that's basic common sense, why don't you go knock on your neighbor's door and ask them about some of the political social media posts they've seen from elected officials and ask them, is that post open? Is it honest? Is it transparent? And count the opinions that you get. Open, honest, and transparent according to who? That we would have guidelines to ensure our commentary reflects well on the city. Well, what reflects well on the city? Who makes that determination? If I say raising taxes is stupid and you think that it's not stupid, did my comments break the rule of reflecting well on the city or reverse the roles? Who makes that determination? The only body that can regulate these changes is the council. Talk about Orwellian guidelines. Well, we want to make sure that, sir, we want to make sure that your post, I felt that it wasn't open, I felt that it wasn't honest, I felt it wasn't transparent. I don't think it reflected well on the city. Well, according to who? Why? Because it hurt your feelings? Because you disagree with it? The recommendations that we follow based on the school board guidelines are even a little bit more concerning. Avoid putting content that indicates you've already formed an opinion on pending matters. So don't use a direct communication tool to communicate directly with citizens before we make an official decision to state your position. That's what this, I'll read it again to make sure you can interpret it your own way, but avoid posting content that indicates you've already formed an opinion on pending matters. Well, I'll tell you right now, I violated that a lot because I posted a lot that I thought it's ridiculous to regulate social media. So I've already been in violation of this proposed idea multiple times. I was in violation when we discussed the upcoming special called meeting. I was in violation anytime I share my personal view on any public matter that hasn't been finalized. That's outrageous. That's not a common sense guideline. In fact, I'm a little ashamed that our school board has adopted this guidelines. I know they operate under different rules, but wow, that's absurd. Post only content that the district has already released to the public. That's mildly concerned because in this case they refer to if it's by law supposed to be confidential, keep it confidential, but you don't need a new guideline to tell you to follow the law. We already have the law. There's guidelines on how to restate what happened in this proposed guide for us to use. There's guidelines based on very open-ended views of manner that reflects well on the district, manner that reflects well on the city. None of these things mean anything. They're simply become a political tool. There's this idea that government needs to get involved in every new thing. It's just a little absurd. And look, I use social media. I love being on council and I love serving the residents and I'll serve as they want me to, but I don't have the ability to go to all these daytime events. I work a day job that is pretty strict. I make all my council events. I make all the meetings. I take days off when I need to go to take days off for council, but I don't have the opportunity to shake hands and to hear directly from residents in person at all of these daytime events. And I certainly don't think that should preclude people from serving on council. But I have technology now, an opportunity to have those same direct conversations through a social media platform that allows me to discuss my views on a topic. It allows me to debate my views on a topic with residents. It allows me to share why I believe what I believe. It allows me to share what's coming up so that they can be aware of an issue that they may find important. All of these things could become in violation of what's being proposed. We don't need another government task force to tell us how we need to regulate speech. And this idea that our rights have an obligation that needs to be managed by the state regulation, that's actually contrary to a right. The idea is, oh, you have a right so far as you follow the guidelines that have been specifically designated by the government officials. We've talked about how absurd it is over and over again. The proposal is even more absurd than I was worried about. it's not an exaggeration to say that it's Orwellian in nature, some of these ideas of making sure that the council gets to determine whether or not your post was open, honest, and transparent enough, and the council gets to determine whether or not your post reflected well on the city. No, thank you.
Dr. Kaiser.
I agree that anyone, if you want to use social media, I'm not a big social media person when it comes to political matters. I use it for more of a social platform. So if you want to post, I don't think either that we should be judging subjectively. And so, and I agree, sometimes it's going to offend someone, sometimes it's going to offend a lot, sometimes it'll offend nobody. I would like, the only thing I would like to see is something on the legal issues with this. Because while we can say, oh, we know this is legal or that's not legal, I don't know that that's true. So I'm not saying regulate anything, because if you want to post your opinion on something, go for it. I am perfectly fine with that. You know, I would hope people would be responsible with it. I think we all can be. But I think it is important that we do know, to protect us and the residents of the city in general, that we know what the legal issues are with using this. And that those are the only things that I would like to see, is something, because I know, again, it's been said, oh, you can just put a disclaimer, this does not represent, and I believe Mr. Zeck said that does not absolve us of any responsibility. I didn't know that at the time until I heard that. You know, and I know some of the council members had done that, posted something and then put, oh, you know, here's my disclaimer, and then we're told that really doesn't do anything. And so I think it would be good just to have something laid out that says, these are the legal ramifications should you do this. Or, hey, you know, we would recommend you not do this because, you know, I don't want any of us up here to be sued. I don't want to put the city at risk. And so to know, again, the legal portion of this, I think, might be important.
Mr. Edwards?
It appears to me that you guys should probably be a part of the subcommittee. I think you guys form that subcommittee and you guys bring it back to council and let us know what you all come up with. That's what I think.
Mr. Larson?
We don't need a subcommittee. And I agree with Dr. Kaiser that we should have an educational briefing on the legal ramifications of using social media, but we already agreed to that to a council 2 times ago when we discussed this. So we're already in agreement on that.
Mr. Edwards?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to nominate a chair for the subcommittee. Mr.
Actually, this is only on for discussion this evening. Okay. Dr. Scagliola?
Yeah, it's really important. As I mentioned, we do have the guidelines already that exist, but they don't really deal with social media, which can be very, very challenging. And a lot of times they're more emotional than anything else when it comes to this topic. You know, for some reason, the argument has shifted towards, you know, punishment and who's going to dictate, who's going to say what I can say and what I can't say. As I mentioned, absolutely no desire to dictate to anybody. I think there is a gap in our information packages about what is appropriate and what isn't. And I provided some of the information that was presented in the package. So I'll let you know what I had in mind and why I had it in mind. And those guidelines, those recommendations, are simply that, guidelines and recommendations. We determine, we as a council can determine, I think, because the commentary we had last week, you know, we're adults here. We can determine what's right and what's wrong. So I don't know why there is, I don't know if I'd even call it, fear of going forward with this. It is a touchy subject, I'll give you that. But I think it needs to be addressed. And that's why I said I'll open it up. 3 members of the council, that won't constitute a forum. And if you like, get some residents who can weigh in on the issue. We've got some residents out there who understand what social media is all about. I appreciate their input. I never even claimed that I know everything about this subject. But every time I sit in a Delphi group or something like that, hey, I'm going to learn something too. And isn't education what it's all about? I'm not saying anybody's doing anything wrong. Not at all. But let's make sure that if we're going to play by the new rules, we know what those rules are. And that's the reason I think this is an important item. And like I said, with your indulgence, I'd like to sit on that committee and maybe orchestrate, work on collaboration, see what we can come up with as a team. If you want to be part of the team, hey, that's awesome. Truth of the matter is, I'd like to have you, any one of you, as part of the solution rather than part of the problem. Let me know what you're thinking. That's all I have, sir.
Dr. Scagliola, I do have to ask you, given your last statement, what is the problem that we're trying to address?
The particular problem we're trying to address is that our guides are incomplete because they deal with City Council media communications guidelines, which had to do with, well, basically talking to the media. There's other aspects of it now. I remember when emails first came out. What could possibly go wrong with emails? But it's amazing how many people lost their job because of something they printed on email. People have a right to be heard. They sure do, but they also have a responsibility. You can't, freedom of speech is not absolute. There's a lot of things you can't do. And, well, you can. You have the right to do it. But chances are you'll pay the price for it. That's all I have.
Mr. Davis?
Again, I think I was rather clear on my perspective last meeting. I have to agree with Councilman Larson. I just don't get it. I don't understand the need for a working group and not to take anything away or offend any of the good citizens that we have attending this meeting here tonight. I'm not sure that you're getting the right value added of some residents of the city being on a working group saying, well, here's what we think the social media policy should be for the city council. Because if you get a resident out there that says, well, I think you should be able to talk about anything you want whenever you want because I want to know, the reality of it is some of the actions that you could take on social media have legal ramifications on them. And that's why I've said from day one, I have absolutely no desire to restrict any member's actions on social media in any way, shape, or form. I just think that the city should provide some kind of training to their staff, to the council, and to the boards and commission members on potential legal ramifications of what you do. Like I said, one of the common things is if Mr. Larson wants to engage in a running dialogue with anybody on social media, congratulations. If you're able to reach out to them and do that, fantastic. But legally, if he makes a comment and then I join in and make a comment, and then Councilmember Scagliola joins in and makes a comment, and then Councilman Edwards or Councilman Crawford joins in, now we start hitting a quorum, potentially. That's a potential legal issue. Now, a resident out there is going to say, I don't care. I think this is great. I can see what my 4 or 5 councilmen are thinking about. And that's great from a resident's perspective. But it's not from a legal perspective if we're violating state law. So again, I just don't see the value added of having us, when we don't know all the rules, get together and say, why don't we do this? I certainly don't see the value of bringing in some residents to say, well, here's our opinion too. I think there's enough case law out there or other things that come out through TML that say, hey, here are some general guidance, things to think about, and let it go at that.
Dr. Scagliola?
Yeah, I really am all for that. The thing is, where's the guidance coming from? How's it being put together? And then how's it being presented to us? If you don't discuss it, how does it get discussed?
So I'd like to just remind the council that we gave direction to our city attorney to come back to us with a proposed education format and content around the use of social media. I think that the proposal included offering an optional education for all members of council and potentially all appointees of the city council on the legal aspects of social media, the legal ramifications for certain actions and activities. And I think that that optional training should be made available to the entire city council, should be made available to all of our appointees, and those that wish to avail themselves of that. I believe it's already built. And I have to say, I think that the offering of education to ourselves and to our appointees, so that if one chooses to avail oneself of that education so as to be well informed on how to engage in the use of social media, is plenty. Because and I did not go to law school and I am not an attorney, but even hate speech is protected speech. Even stupid speech is protected speech. Even foolish speech is protected speech, as it should be. And any member of this council that wishes to go on social media and make a fool of themselves, or do something stupid, or say something hateful, it is the inherent right of that individual to do so, and I guarantee you the voters will correct for anything that they find to be untenable or unacceptable to them. It is not our decision. That decision belongs to the voters. We work for them. That said, I think that the city attorney's office should come back before this council, should review once again with us the curriculum that they have proposed, that we should ask them to put that curriculum together and make it available to every member of this council and every appointee of this council so that we can be well informed and make good adult decisions as we march forward. Dr. Scagliola?
Yeah, I do find that acceptable. But just saying that, yeah, we should ought to be doing this and isn't getting it done. But if we provide the direction to our legal staff to, hey, make it happen, that's acceptable. I have absolutely no desire to reinvent the wheel. If we're already moving in that direction, let's move.
Very good. Mr. Edwards?
I will say every year we go to TML, Texas Municipal League conferences, and each year they do have a section on social media and its uses. They talk about it. It's an educational piece. It is something that I encourage the members of council who've never gone to TML to make sure they avail themselves for that particular event. It is sadly the issue that we had in the past with one of our members of council. I don't think that they'd ever attended a TML meeting, and so therefore they were never given that opportunity to avail themselves to that teaching or to that lesson. So I say avail yourself to the teachings and to the opportunities to educate yourself on social media through Texas Municipal League as well.
So, Mr. Santee, our legal team's already done some work on this. Could you arrange in the next couple of meetings to come back and present once again the initial framework that was presented before, and perhaps begin after that presentation the process of putting together something formalized for us?
Yes, sir, I will.
Very good. Very good. Any other comments, questions from council before we move on? All right, very good. The next item that we have on the agenda this evening is a closed session. City Council will meet in closed session under Section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code, personnel matters, to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of the city manager. Before I move us into closed session, I will look to the right and left and ask if everyone is in agreement that we need to go and have this discussion this week. We have published and have begun receiving, published for and begun receiving applicants for our position. If we need to discuss something in particular, I'm happy to take us into a closed session. If not, then we can certainly take it up in 2 weeks when we return, which will still be in advance of our beginning to review any of the resumes and applications we receive. But it's the pleasure of council.
Mr. Mayor,
we've received some resumes.
I believe that we have. If we have not received them, I've certainly been contacted and told that some will be forthcoming from some individuals. I'm looking. We have received already. We've begun to receive. Yeah. Okay.
Do we have to go into closed session? I'm curious how many we received, but I don't know that we have anything to look at to make any determination. I'm not sure it's worth going into closed session.
Yeah, we wouldn't be looking at any resumes at this time. I think what we talked about in closed session was that we would have the posting up through the last day of the month, and then after the posting is closed, we'll begin to review everything at that same time. Okay?
Not necessary from my point of view.
I'm kind of getting we don't have to right this minute. Okay, very good. Then we're not going to go into closed session at this time. We'll take that up again in 2 weeks, next week being the third week, so we're not scheduled. So the item 8A, taking any action based on discussions held in closed session under agenda item 8. We did not go into closed session. There is no need to move into take any action. There's no need for a roll call vote confirmation. Next item, we have our requests and announcements, and the next item we have our announcements by the acting city manager, Mr. James.
A couple things. One, for folks who may be watching at home, watching the video later, there are 4 information updates that are in the packet that should be available online. One has to do with direction regarding a request we received to rename Oak Forest Park. The second is a bit of an update on improvements that were done to Windy Swan Memorial Park and Pool, really. The next is an overview of the Shred Day event and staff's recommendation that we would propose to fund doing that twice going forward in the future, unless we hear otherwise. And then a summary put together of the fee schedule changes proposed by staff from the various presentations we've heard. So there's that. The other, I'll just as under the guise of an announcement, is anytime, obviously, we get citizen comments about something going on at the city that's a concern, we go back, take a look, and investigate that. And certainly, we will do that in this case. If council ever wants an update on the status of that, certainly feel free to contact me. I can walk you through that information. And then again, we communicate with council in various ways as appropriate on that topic. And so certainly with big issues raised, we try to communicate that out to what we find with council and what directions recommended going forward. So we'll do that with things tonight as well.
Very good, and thank you, sir. Next item, request by the mayor and council members that items be placed on a future city council agenda. Do we have anything this evening? Mr. Crawford?
James, would it be effective and worthwhile to give the brief you were just discussing in a closed session when we meet the next time as an update for everybody at once, instead of saying the story 7 or 8 times? Or would you rather not?
Perhaps if you would permit me some time to talk with folks on issues, and then maybe you can ask me that question next meeting, and I'll give you my thoughts, and then we can get direction from council.
Thank you.
Very good. Dr. Scagliola, you were saying anything? Anyone else? Mr. Larson?
A couple of items. The first, I'm very grateful for the information packet provided for the Shred Day, but I was hoping that that could be a discussion item like our other events are done with kind of a public presentation. And then second, I would like to discuss the makeup of the interview committee. And just to be clear, not the individual members. I think everybody on there is certainly qualified to be on there, but maybe the philosophy in terms of the makeup of that committee and whether or not we should have fewer council members and more board members, and maybe just like a council liaison, or anyways, to have a discussion about that particular committee structure.
Mrs. Dennis, you have everything you need on that? Okay. Anybody else?
I have.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Yes, I'd like to have a closed session to discuss, to have a discussion regarding the violation of Code of Ethics regarding Councilmember Kaiser and her comments.
So I was going to follow our procedure under our ethics code and discuss the allegations made with the Mayor Pro Tem and the City Attorney. And that's actually the proper method. If we look at I apologize. Page 8, under the section titled Procedure for Conducting Inquiries, in the case of any alleged violation of the ethics policy, it is the mayor and the mayor pro tem that are to discuss that with the city attorney and then make a decision as to the appropriate manner to go forward. And so I would ask Councilman Gutierrez if you would allow us to go through that initial process in following what's the guidelines of the ethics.
I withdraw my agenda item, sir.
Thank you, sir. And I will report back to you on the discussion that the Mayor Pro Tem and I have with the City Attorney. Okay. All right. Nothing else, then we will go to announcements by the Mayor and Council members, and I'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola.
Nothing tonight, sir.
Very good. Mr. Davis? Mr. Gutierrez?
Went to Movie in the Park this past Saturday. It was crowded. There was a lot of people. I think we almost reached capacity. It was great to see the public out there having fun. And kudos to the Parks and Rec team putting this event together. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Larson? Nothing. Mr. Edwards?
Nothing, sir.
Very good. Dr. Kaiser?
I have nothing.
Mr. Crawford?
Attended the police officer swearing in and the other members being recognized and appointed this afternoon. That was very nicely done. Thank you.
Wonderful. And yeah, I just echo what Mr. Crawford said. We were, as a council, invited to attend the instituting of 2 new officers, police officers today, as well as a promotion of 2 other officers, as well as the hiring of a number of dispatchers. And it was an honor to be asked for the first time to, and I don't remember the correct term, Mr. Waite. There are 3 items. There's a PD, there's a bar, there is a name badge, and there is a badge, and those are called the. And as such, I was asked as the representative of the city to put the PD pin on the left lapel of each of the new officers and of the officers that were promoted. And it was quite an honor. And Chief, thank you very much for inviting everyone to be part of that. I think that was fantastic, and it had a palatable effect on me as a resident to see these folks have their insignia and badges put on. Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed it a great deal. And for the council members that attended, thank you for attending. With that said, if there's nothing else from staff or from council, then we stand adjourned.